joint meeting of the Minerals Business and Economic Development to order. First order of business is roll call.
Senator Beitman. Senator Cooper. Senator Rothfuss. Senator Wasserberger. Representative Baer. Representative Burkhart. Representative Duncan. Representative Ayer.
Excused.
Representative Gray. Representative Heiner. Representative Sherwood. Representative Western. Co-Chairman Greer. Co-Chairman Anderson.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Oh, wonderful. Now, as we normally do, we'd sing happy birthday right now to the audience, whoever's got a birthday today, but I think we'll wait just a little bit to do that. So.
Oh, yeah, there she is.
Is there anybody in the audience today that has a birthday? We want to wish them a happy birthday, as we always do. Raise your, there's a birthday. All right, everybody. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Holly. Happy birthday to you.
Did we get that live stream, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, we did. We live streamed that. Yeah, everybody want to hear that. As we always do that, Holly. Yep. Yeah.
Another 15 people got to hear that.
Yeah.
But she can rewind it and watch it again.
Yeah, she can play it over and over. All right, first up this morning is the Wyoming Business Council. I see we have a few people here to represent the Business Council. So take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today we do have quite a few folks, not just in the in live, but also online to answer questions and also to present a number of the items that were requested in your July 8th letter. And we wanted to just walk through those and make sure that you had an opportunity to ask questions about them. My team will be standing ready, and then we'll go through those one by one. Of course, we're open to all questions, any and all questions around these. But if you've got any curveballs, throw them at us. It's baseball season, so let's play ball. With that, we're going to start with the Avalon project, which was the first question. I believe Noel Reed. We have a presentation for that, and Noel Reed, one of our there she is, one of our folks in our investments division, will be walking us through that presentation and learn a little bit more about that Avalon project.
All right. Introduce yourself and carry on.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair. My name is Noel Reed. I'm the Community Development Manager for the Wyoming Business Council. I'm happy to share my screen. I guess I am not able to share my screen, so I will walk through it. Hopefully you guys have it in front.
Mr. Chairman, we'll fix that in a minute.
Okay. Is that presentation this one that she's going to go through? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it's the one called Avalon International Aluminum. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Okay, thank you. So yes, we created a presentation on the Avalon International Aluminum Project as requested. Avalon International Aluminum, they manufacture aluminum products. They specialize in door and window frames and other specialty fixtures. They are looking into moving into manufacturing doors and windows, and they are also interested in other products, including like an HVAC UV light system that can help kill viruses and bacteria and things like that. So they're looking into that right now. A little company background, they are owned by Rick and Baron Carlton, a father-son team. Rick has been in the industry for over 20 years, and Baron, the son, is a nuclear engineer, and he is working on some patented technology in other fields, such as the HVAC UV light systems for viruses. The family purchased the company in January of 2016 and turned what was then a floundering company into a profitable, growing business. They were originally located in Oregon, and so this was a recruitment project. So, why Evanston? Why Wyoming? Rick and Baron, they were familiar with the area, and they were attracted to Wyoming because of the business-friendly climate, the tax structure. They're also interested in the supply chain advantages due to the better logistics and location to raw materials available in Utah. Additionally, they had outgrown their current facility and it was just a lease facility, and they do have interest in owning a building. And they were also very interested in our culture and our workforce ethics. They'd been to the area and they just thought that our workers and our culture was just fit really well with what they wanted for their company. A little bit over the project timeline. A lot of times recruitment and BRC projects can take some time. So this is just a little overview of what happened. And actually the city of Evanston was the first one that started this project with Avalon. So right about 2 years ago, they got the initial phone call from Avalon, and Avalon visited the city of Evanston. And that all actually happened pretty quickly. In the whole month of August, they had the phone call, they visited Evanston, and then they decided that they wanted to move forward with Evanston. So they started in October of 2019 requesting quotes for building construction. They visited Evanston again in January of 2020. And then they began some site plan work in February of that year. As part of that site work, they realized that they maybe needed to look at the Business Ready Community Program to help them with their project. So they began those discussions with the city council. They also realized that they would have to look at some loan options. And so all of that kind of occurred in the spring of 2020. In June of 2020, they did their geotechnical study, and the city of Evanston completed a sewer extension to the lot that they were looking at building. That fall, or last fall, about a year ago, Avalon, or actually the city of Evanston and some business council representative visited the facility in Oregon just to get a feel for what they would need in their new facility and to just continue that relationship. And then last September, they submitted their Business Ready Community application to the Business Council. That process went really quick as well. The company at this time was actually being courted by another state, and so the city of Evanston wanted to move quickly with the BRC application and process in order to give the company some confidence and make sure that they committed to Evanston. So we did our BRC site visit and our Business Council Investment Committee discussion on October 15th. We did it all on the same day. And then we had our Business Council special board meeting at the end of October with the State Loan and Investment Board meeting at the beginning of November last year. Those were all approved unanimously. And so we got the grant agreement executed in January of this year. And they are planning to begin construction this month, with construction being completed by next summer. So just some numbers of what this project will do for the community and for the state. They'll have 17 jobs initially, and by the end of the 5 years, which is our reporting requirements for BRC, they'll have 60 jobs created with anticipated sales of $11.7 million. The wages that they anticipate for these 60 jobs average $34.50 an hour, which is roughly 140% of the county median wage. They also anticipate providing benefits equivalent to $3 to $4 per hour per employee. The BRC grant that will be recouped in about 3.19 years in economic impact. As I stated earlier, there is a loan component of it. It was a $3 million grant and a $1.1 million loan. So the BRC loan with interest payback will back to the BRC account will be about $1.2 million, plus another $750,000 will be recaptured as part of the grant repayment, which is in our BRC rules. The contributions that the city of Evanston did to the project was the land, which was valued at $130,000, as well as that sewer infrastructure valued at $500,000. And then the company of Avalon also did some contributions with assistance from a local bank, $775,000 for equipment that are non-eligible expenses as part of the Business Council funds, $260,000 in moving expenses, $40,000 in engineering costs, somewhere between $150,000 and $250,000 for building materials, and then they also contributed a $500,000 cash match. So what does all of this accomplish? The building will be a 60,000 square foot building, as well as some site development such as landscaping, parking, etc. In addition to Avalon being located in that business lot, an additional business is going to relocate to Evanston due to the water and sewer infrastructure that will be in place due to this project. That lot has actually already been sold, so that'll happen fairly quickly here. Area unemployment positively affected. Between $5,000 and $15,000 per year in local sales tax is what's estimated. $56,000 per year in state sales tax estimation, between $25,000 and $30,000 per year in property taxes. And as I stated previously, Wyoming will be Avalon's home versus Mississippi, which was the state that was trying to court them by offering $1 million cash relocation incentive.
Mr. Chairman.
One question here.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Durkart.
So they rejected Mississippi's offer for $1 million in relocation incentives. So what were their reasons for coming to Wyoming? Have they ever expounded on those? And second question, I'll just ask both of them now. The company that has already purchased the other lot, are they moving in from out of state, or are they an existing company?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair, and thank you for those questions. So why Wyoming? They really liked the area, the culture, as well as a lot of the transportation logistics of the area. Yes, Mississippi offered the incentive, but they wanted to be in Wyoming, and they wanted to be in the Evanston area. So I think it was really the culture, the tax benefits, the business friendly environment of the state of Wyoming was why they were really interested in Wyoming. And the other company, I believe it is an out of state company that is relocating to the place.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. So then the next page is just a couple of diagrams on that process and where the money goes. So again, it was a $3 million BRC grant. The red colors are the money kind of into the project, and then the green figures are what we get out of the project, the community and the state. So $3 million grants. Avalon putting in about 1.775 total into the project, and Evanston putting 630,000 into the project. But out of that, we will get a lease of $2.3 million over 15 years, plus the building purchase when Avalon purchases the building. The community receives a 60,000 square foot building as well on 7 acres of developed land with water and sewer infrastructure. Annual taxes of $93,000. $2 million will come back to the BRC account between the loan repayment and the grant revenue recapture. And then the city of Evanston will be able to recapture $2.25 million for future local economic development efforts. And then
One question.
Yes,
Question.
thank you.
Here, just a second. Go ahead.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mr. Chairman. So I'm trying to reconcile this graph with the 2 slides ago on the by the numbers. So the Evanston CDO received a $3 million grant, and then Avalon then also received a loan from the BRC, so it's 4.2 million. So you see my confusion. The reason for this exercise was to give us a clear path and understanding. And then when I look at this, it's not clear to me. So what we're looking at is what I want to know is how much money we put in, where the money's going, what is being utilized, what's being recaptured, and then what's the net result. Not saying bad project, good project. I just want to know these numbers.
Can you make that clear to him?
Yes, Mr. Committee Chair. Thank you. I will attempt to. So you are correct. It was a $3 million grant and about a $1.1 million loan. When you look at the that chart where it says where does the money go, we put the loan figure into the Avalon contribution since they pay that back. So it is money that ends up coming back to the state that is paid through the lease payments. And just a point of clarification, the loan actually will go to the city of Evanston, as that's the process with our BRC account, but then it will get paid back through lease payments by the Avalon company. And so that's where the 1.775 million under Avalon includes the loan and interest payments.
Another question.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we analyze this recapture structure, I think we need to make that clear. So out of the $3 million grant, and I'm just trying to understand this, the city of Evanston through their CDO took the $3 million grant, developed infrastructure, which BRC is designed to do that. I understand that. Okay, and then out of that 3 million, 2 million will come back as recapture back to the program is how I'm looking at this. Okay. The loan, the 1.2, however, will go back to the CDO. 100% of that. Is that what you just said?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chairman. Thank you. So total back to the BRC account will be 2 million, and that includes loan payment plus interest plus 750,000, which is 25% of the grant amount, which is what the BRC rules require. So that's what the total 2 million is. The city of Evanston will actually recoup 2.25 million, which is the 75% remaining of the BRC grant. So the other 75% of that total 3 million grant will remain in the city of Evanston, so they can do other community or economic development projects, and they don't have to come back to the BRC program for more additional money.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to understand.
Okay, you made that clear to him, and now we have another question that you need to make clear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I keep having confusion because I keep having these different terms interchanged. We keep saying grant, but yet they're having to pay it back. So a grant is money that you don't have to pay back, but they're having to pay back. So maybe we need to change this because it's quite confusing for me. Can you help me understand why is it a grant when they're actually paying it back?
Can you help her understand that?
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair. I will do my best, and Julie Kozlowski is also on the call, and she has a little bit more historical knowledge with the BRC program. But I do know not our last round of BRC rules, but the time before 2015, 2016, that was something that was added to our rules, that 25% of grant dollars must be recaptured to the BRC program. And so that just came out of a rule process. And I'll let Julie expand on that if she has anything additional.
Go ahead, Julie.
Thank you, Mr. Committee Chair. So the revenue recapture piece.
Identify yourself first.
I'm sorry, Julie Kozlowski, Investments Director for the Wyoming Business Council. The revenue recapture piece was actually driven by a footnote of legislation, and I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I'm having trouble recalling it. I think it might have been Senate File 100, but it was at that time when we re-promulgated the rules for the BRC program. We took a lot of public comment. We actually started with proposing 50% recapture because the legislation, the footnote did not specify how much recapture, just said to explore a recapture piece for the BRC program. And so staff put out there, how about if we recapture 50% of all grants? And we got a lot of feedback from local EDOs, from municipalities, all local governments, that would be onerous because they use their recapture to do operations and maintenance for BRC assets that they are responsible for. and that they would be comfortable with the 25% piece, still allowing them enough to take care of the assets that they are fortunate enough to have built in their community with the BRC funds. And then also it helps them build a little bit of capacity in terms of, as Noel mentioned, like with the Avalon project, then they have some funding additional to put into other projects, to do projects on their own without having to come to the state. And so ultimately, after a lot of public comment and discussion, it was settled on 25% revenue recapture. So that revenue recapture piece on the grant was a result of legislation, and then we then put that into rule.
So I have a question. The $2 million is loan repayment and the 25% then?
Mr. Chairman, yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah. Follow up? Yeah. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for that explanation. I'm still struggling with the idea of calling it a grant when you're actually paying back. So, but I guess that's personal. So the other question I have is, do we take into account the lifespan, expected life expectancy of these assets versus what they're actually paying? Because sometimes they're going to be paying long after the lifespan of the assets. So is that taken into account, or is there any flexibility on that part?
Who'd like to answer that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll answer that. Representative Duncan, yes, the life of the expected life of the asset is taken into consideration as we craft a revenue recapture agreement, and as we structure loans, we consider, the life of the property and what was constructed or financed with those BRC dollars. So we do take that into consideration.
Any other questions? Any other questions? All right. Oh, we got one more question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but I think it's important. The reason we asked for this information so we could get a really clear understanding of this, and I'm not one, this has nothing to do with Avalon at all. It has nothing to do with the city of Evanston or their economic development. So that everybody needs to understand that this was an example so we could understand how this program works. Okay. So I'm not being critical of anybody. What I want to do is find this out. And, to me is what was the total cost for Avalon, okay, for business X, to locate in Wyoming, to come to Wyoming and create 60 jobs. Okay. What did the state of Wyoming put into that? How was that put in? Grant, loan, contributions from the CDO. What did the company bring to the table? And then also why did they locate to Wyoming? That's good. The why Wyoming is a good question. So I'm sitting here, $300 million grant coming in. Well, so then I come city of Evanston contributions, 130 for that was the land, and 500,000 for infrastructure. Well, that was paid for out of the BRC grant, I'm going to guess. That was infrastructure done with the BRC grant. So then the question, so you're all shaking your head, no. Okay. Where did the city of Evanston get that? They got it from a prior grant then. Right? I mean, I know how this works, and that's fine. I'm not even being critical of it. What I want to do is make sure everybody sitting up here understands what's going on, because it's our job then to communicate that to the rest of the legislature. And I'm almost more confused now than I was 2 months ago. So I guess I did a bad job writing my letter asking for information.
Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, just
Great.
following up on that, I mean, I've seen a lot of these they're very good presentations and they're well crafted, but I think what we need more is like a financing plan. I mean, and what the dollar amounts are. And so I also would like more information. Thank you.
Sounds like we want more information. I'm not sure we're going to do that today. Maybe we need to have you rework that and bring it back. That'd be all right. Can you do that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we'd be happy to do that. I would say that if I can have one ask, more information may not always be better. So I think it would be important for us to work closely with Representative Greer and those to ferret out the exact information. It is not a simple process. I will agree with that. We all live it every day, and we begin to understand it. But it's not a simple process. But I think what we also have to remember is that this program is designed, just as Representative Greer mentioned, to be in the community a self-sustaining element of their economic development operations. And so the intent and the word grant, Representative Duncan said it herself, is a little bit confusing, right? A grant with a recapture doesn't sound much like a grant. I look at that as an investment into the community. And there is some portion of that investment that comes back to the state. And so we do have a loan component. Everybody understands a loan, I think, for the most part, how that works. The grant component is intended to develop a cycle of economic development at the local level so that that can become self-sustaining and also take care of that asset. And I think that's the component that does get a little bit tricky and it gets a little bit confusing. And I think when we have a lot of these numbers laid out, it's tough to do. So we'll do our best to take that back. I think now with a little bit more clarity, we'll work with the folks who've had questions and try to understand that a little bit better on what can be shown, because we want it to be clear, not just to you all, but also to the economic development organizations around the state. While many of them understand this game really, really well and utilize it to their community's benefit and to the economic development in their community's benefit. Many do not. So thank you.
Can you work that up with the representatives and bring it back to the November meeting?
Mr. Chairman, yes, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, one question.
Yeah, so Mr. Durrell, all your comments are good ones, and I appreciate you trying to get this together, but you understand the importance that we take a complex issue and we're able to understand it very clearly. And then this gets to the heart of my comments at the last meeting regarding recapture. Okay, so funding's an issue. Okay, if we can keep funding in BRC as a result of a revolving investment, we'll just use that term because I like that term, investment fund, that is a good thing. That helps the program exist long into the future. Okay, the sustainability of CDOs, again, goes back to the comments I made. It depends upon where they are in their economic development cycle. Newcastle, for example, is just starting. Their recapture to them would be detrimental for them to succeed. For other communities around the state, we're priming a pump that's running. And so we need to look at this globally on a statewide basis when we start talking about recapture issues.
Yes. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durrell, how often do these BRC grants or these initiatives involve some kind of rent or lease to own covenant in these agreements with these companies? So, it sounds like with this one and with others, obviously in the Sheridan area, that's been a component of some of these agreements that these local joint powers boards or the CDOs strike with these companies. How often is that a component? Because that seems to be a pretty constant theme in most of these BRC grants and loans that I've reviewed, is that there's a kind of a rent to own or lease to own component for some kind of warehouse facility, et cetera. So is that in every case or in the vast majority?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Western, I'll probably have Julie Kozlowski answer the more detailed piece, but that is something that is relatively recent. It has not been I believe not been in the life of the BRC program. It's something that's relatively recent, and she could probably provide, or Josh Keefe can provide some more information on more details.
Is she going to do that now, Mr. Durrell?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if you
Oh,
allow it.
okay, yeah. Go
Thank you,
ahead,
Mr.
Julie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Most, if not all of them that involve a building, BRC projects that involve a building have a buy provision for the business to actually purchase the building after a certain period of time. And that is, those are individually constructed because each project is different and has many elements to consider. But it's been a component of the program since buildings were added as something that could be considered infrastructure. And that's been probably 12 years that we've been doing that. So I believe I can't honestly think of an example where there isn't a case where the building is offered the opportunity to purchase the asset at a certain point in the life of that project.
You must have answered the question. All right, you want to move on in your presentation, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Noel, anything to add there?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, nothing to add. There were a couple of pictures at the end of that presentation, which shows the Oregon facility for Avalon, and it just shows how that they were just, over capacity at their current facility, and that was another reason that they were looking to relocate. So, but yeah, I'm happy to answer any other questions that you or any other committee member may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Noel. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now we'll move on to the portion about the BRC loans and the loan programs that we have, and Josh Keefe will be covering much of that information.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Minerals Committee. The next item in your packet, you'll notice I created just a one pager because there was expression to know exactly how many BRC loans we have done over the history of the program. And so what I did was I compiled that into basically three different categories.
Josh, give him your name.
Sorry, I apologize, sir. Josh Keefe, Economic Development Finance Manager with the Business Council. Sorry about that. You'll notice at the top there, the first box is BRC loans that are obligated / approved, meaning that they have been gone through the process and are SLIB approved, but maybe they have not yet begun construction. You'll see on there that the Avalon project is the second one from the bottom, specifically about that. And you can see the amount that's being lent as well as the interest rate being charged for that specific project. And so the next section down are projects that are completed and they are currently performing.
Go
ahead.
One question.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman.
Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, on these approved and obligated, what is the time frame of these loans? Are they all about 30 years? I mean, what kind of timeframes are we talking about with this money?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
Representative Duncan. Each loan is structured individually. It is not, we don't have a specific BRC loan policy that we say you shall have a 25-year loan on a building. It is dependent upon the revenue recapture, the life of the asset, as well as some of the financial strength of the company and their ability to repay. Also, one thing to think about is that a lot of times you heard the Avalon company did work with a local financial institution. And so we take that into consideration as well, making sure that they can service the debt, not only to us, but to the other folks involved as well, so that we get the project and try and make it successful.
Representative Heiner has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, I see a variation in interest rates here, 3.5%, and there's one here for 0% interest rates. I thought there was a minimum interest rate that we had to apply to these loans.
Go ahead.
Chairman Anderson, Representative Heiner. Yes, there is. There 1% on revenue generating projects. You'll notice the 0% one, I believe, is the Camplex one. That was a project that was challenging to provide upgrades to that facility, and really relied and will rely on ticket sales for things like that. And so that since it was to a public entity and not necessarily a private company as the tenant of that building, that one is a little bit different with that.
That answer your
Follow-up?
question? Follow up? Yes.
So the rules that you have of a minimum interest rate does not apply to public entities? Is that what I'm hearing?
Go ahead.
Chairman Anderson, Representative Heiner, I don't believe that's the case, but I will honestly I don't know. I might have to have Julie help me on that one. I helped structure the deal, but I will admit I don't know the law inside and out when it comes to BRC.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Representative Heiner, the statute only says that loans shall be made at no or low interest rates. So the statute for this program does not specify a specific interest rate or a minimum interest rate.
I have a question. That first project on that approved, obligated, but not started yet is 4 years old. Is that typical of these, that they don't, nothing happens for 4 years? Or am I misreading that?
No, Chairman Anderson, that is correct. That is the enhanced use lease project. That is a project to provide infrastructure for housing for F.E. Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne. Once, I think we all know, once the federal government gets involved, things move a little slower than just dealing with maybe the local municipality. So, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Western, it's going to get Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just kind of looking through the completed BRC loan projects, I'm not seeing Weatherby on here. Am I missing something, or?
Chairman
Go ahead.
Anderson, Representative Western. So the Weatherby project specifically did not have a loan component to it. And so this is just BRC projects with loan components in them. So that one is not on there.
Follow up?
Mr. Chairman, if I recall correctly, and please let me know if I'm incorrect, but I thought there was a lease to buy component for that building, or my memory failing me.
Go ahead.
Chairman Anderson, Representative Weston, there is a lease to buy component, yes. However, that doesn't always equate to meaning that there's a loan component.
So that gets, or Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
that gets reflected on Joint Powers Board's balance sheet, but not yours.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Western, correct.
Thank you.
Yes. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of the things that's striking to me in this page is 23 total loans in the entire life of the loan program. I mean, there have been hundreds of WBC projects. So, I mean, you're just talking about the Weatherby project. Why are loans so shunned upon, as opposed to the more, whatever we're going to call it, grant, investment? And yes, the fact that we do have some recapture, although it should be a higher percentage, is good, but it just seems like the amount of loans have been extremely lacking. Why is that?
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Representative Gray, I think it's a multitude of factors, to be honest with you. I think one of the things is that as time has progressed, and you'll notice on the sheet that I believe the oldest loan on the sheet is maybe from 2009, but that was kind of an outlier. You'll see that it didn't really pick up until maybe the mid 2010s when the loan program started. Also at that same time, I think we started to see state revenues go down, and that is when the BRC incentive program also took significant hits. And so in order to try and maintain the life of the BRC program, the number of loans really ramped up at that time. And also one other piece to remember, I think, in addition to that, is that a lot of these loans are for revenue generating projects. Many projects, if we are just putting in a straight water pipe, for example, in a city, town, or county, are not really a revenue generating project necessarily to the state. And so that loans are typically for business committed projects where there is a company involved. However, I think we also do readiness projects, enhancements, and planning grants around the state as well, which would not constitute a loan component necessarily.
Answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, go ahead.
So the next section. Sorry, I apologize. Turn my mic back on. The next section is like I said, the completed BRC loan projects. You can see the number there and the outstanding balances currently. So all of those loans are performing as agreed. We have not had any troubles, knock on wood, to date with those projects. And then also down below, you can see the paid off BRC projects. A number of those have gone to entities like the Jackson Hole Airport for fuel farm type of projects, the City of Laramie for lighting, Goshen County with the Goshen Care Center, things like that. So, and then I also included in there, just so you could see kind of the average yield and also the weighted average yield, depending on the category for those. The next part down, as Representative Gray said, there have been 23 over the life since we started doing BRC loans. We've collected just under $680,000 in interest income for that. And that is just purely interest earned. That is not the revenue recapture that we touched on earlier with the 25%. And so you can see the average size BRC loan is about $1.25 million, which is relatively close, funny enough, to the Avalon project that we were just discussing. So with that, I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Any more questions? Any more questions? Nope. Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll continue our discussion now and move into business recruiting. One of the things that we wanted to look at were the barriers and the opportunities around business recruiting. I think business recruiting is something that everyone can point to and think about. And it was a question that was brought up, and to help answer some of those questions and talk a little bit about our process and where our needs are and the opportunities might be, I've brought Brandon Marshall and Wendy Lopez to help out with that as well. In fact, it may be better to talk directly to them, but I'll go ahead and just give you a little bit of information on some of the insights. Why there was a question in particular about why a business may reject Wyoming as a place to bring their business and relocate. And so we wanted to talk through some of those. You've got a list in front of you. I think you can see that a lot of those things are related to infrastructure and availability of resources, whether that be things like water and power and lack of those, what we would call shovel-ready sites, those things that can be basically, built upon immediately. And then also, I think the other thing that we want to think about, and this is an important component to all of the economic development that we do, I think we have to look at the economics of things and really look bigger than saying, oh, well, golly, it would be great if a company like this would move here, and realize that one of the drivers, and we mentioned it earlier for Avalon, was the logistics and the economics of doing business here, right? Just because Wyoming's a great place doesn't mean that it always makes business sense. And so for a company like Avalon, it actually made a lot of business sense because they had the transportation in and out in order to do that, which is why I think we see success in certain industries over others because of either the interstate highways and the access to raw materials and making that as cost effective for the business as possible. That's definitely an important thing, what we would call the supply chain issues. Workforce availability and housing are two components that you probably hear a lot. And I don't know if we've come up with any silver bullets. If we have them, I'm happy to turn it over to Wendy and Brandon. I'm guessing they're going to be relatively silent there. But those are big challenges. And it's something that I know that is being addressed in not just our agency and looked at, but also other agencies as well. The lack of incentives, I guess for me, I don't know if I have all of the data to say that lack of incentives they're a component, no doubt. But I think if you look at those, it's also about framing what the incentives are. And one of the challenges that we have, and I think that the BRC program is actually really, really solid. It's a great program. It helps a lot of people. It can be hard to understand. And it can be hard to compare to other states who are throwing what seems like cash at a business. But then, we know where that cash comes from, right? And we know that will end at some point for those businesses, and they'll need to pay that back in some way or another. And so I think the lack of incentives is definitely a part, and we're looking at, and in the next few the bit of time that we have today, we'll begin to talk about those non-infrastructure incentives, so that we can play on an even playing field with the other states that we're competing against. We would all like to believe that the free market system is the greatest thing, and that's how it works, and that'll win out. But we also know that the other states are playing a game that tampers with that. And so those incentives are important to be able to at least frame what we have in terms of their incentives, or provide incentives that look a lot like those, because I think it will help that decision, make it easier for those companies to make it, and have them say, yeah, I'm getting this from XYZ state, but I'm also getting it from Wyoming. And I think that incentive piece is something to explore for sure.
Question here.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I have two questions. First one's real simple. Are these reasons, this is the priority? You've done it from the highest to the lowest. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Greer, yes, sir.
Okay. And then, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to hear the comments regarding looking at what do we do for non-infrastructure incentives. And so we had a long discussion yesterday regarding Industrial Siting Commission. Great example. Now, these aren't businesses coming in. These are large industrial projects, a little bit different. But nonetheless, you look in there, we're giving a 2.5% incentive to pick up unmitigated costs associated with the community. Not a lot different than infrastructure in some ways, but we don't sell it. We don't show that as being an incentive when in fact it is. And so this rebranding, this think about how we restructure in a way that we're getting our message out to businesses that we are actually doing more than other states. Because I feel like I'm picking on Avalon. I'm not. So company X example, right? $1 million cash to relocate. Geez, that sounds wonderful. But what did the state of Wyoming and Evanston do? Significantly more. But it sounded really complicated. And if you go to Missouri, get $1 million cash, help cover operating costs. We've got to find a better message. Would you agree?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Greer, I agree wholeheartedly. And you're right. I think that the messaging definitely needs to be better, because what happens when you get into the discussions with an organization about moving, that's a complex thing, and they're willing to listen to the details and understand it fully. But you're right about the messaging of the incentives, and what Wyoming is willing to do is obviously something that needs to be simpler, so that maybe more people, it will pique more interest. So well put. Thank you. So I do have a couple of recruiting experts here to answer any questions. That list is obviously, it's not 100% exhaustive, but it's definitely 80% of the challenges that we face, and it is a ranked list. So we'll stand for any questions, or you could take it easy on Brandon and Wendy.
We don't take it easy on anybody. Any questions? Any questions? Your mic is on, Western. Are you ready for a question? Oh, yes, Representative Duncan's ready for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when we're talking about recruiting, help me out with, I had heard a complaint by a former legislator that your division wasn't going actively out to some particular conferences, trade shows, things. So can you tell me exactly where are you going? Because one of the complaints was because of our large rare earth deposits, was that, well, that's the Energy Authority's job. And I'm like, no, that should be Marketing Wyoming's job. And that could be anything. So I guess my question is, where are you going? And do you need to be going more?
So Mr. Durrell, can you tell us where you're going?
Mr. Chairman, and Representative Duncan, we can definitely walk through the trade shows that we attend and the efforts we make into those industries. And I'll let Brandon and Wendy, which of you would like to tackle that one? Wendy.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Committee Chair and Representative Duncan. Currently,
Wendy, can you introduce yourself, please?
we've been really bad about doing that.
Yes, you
haven't we?
have.
Yes, sorry, I
Yeah, you
apologize.
got some bad marks on that.
Wendy Lopez, I'm the business recruitment manager at the Business Council. So I'm the one that gets to go to a lot of these fun things. Currently for this year, and I can kind of talk about this year, and maybe I'll let Brandon talk about some efforts that we've done in the past. I know as budgets have been cut, we've kind of had to narrow our focus to certain things that we seem to have the most success with. So next month, I'm going to a modern day marine show, which is tech, firearms, things like that. We're using some federal STEP grant funding, and we have 4 Wyoming companies that are attending that show. So we are going with them. I will be doing some meetings with other businesses while we're there. So really targeting kind of, like I said, some of that tech, firearms, and defense kind of companies like that. And that was at the request of these companies that wanted to attend that show. After that, we've got the Clean Power Show in December. So that used to be like the American Wind Energy. It's now Clean Power. So wind, solar, storage, nuclear, all of that kind of stuff. That's in Salt Lake in December. So I'll be attending that. Especially now we've doubled our wind capacity in the last year. So there seems to be, I'm hearing more interest from companies based on that. And this, the project in Rollins, the Chokecherry Sierra Madre, that's now under construction. So a lot of development in that area. So we're attending that show. And then January every year we attend SHOT Show, which is, what is that? The National Shooting Sports and Hunting Show. Firearms, again, that's definitely one of kind of our target sectors. We seem to get a lot of play in that interest, especially with Weatherby and Gunworks and some of those other companies. So we attend that one every year. The governor usually comes for a day. I think the last 2 years that we've gone, we have conducted 15 to 20 meetings with various businesses that are at the show and just talk Wyoming up a lot. We've had other agencies that have participated with us. Manufacturing Works went with us last year to be able to promote some of their services that they provide. We had Workforce Services with us. So different things like that. Those are kind of, we've done Select USA, which is kind of more federal foreign direct investment type of thing too. And then we attend a lot of conferences based around site selectors. So Site Selector Guild, IAMC, which is Industrial Asset Management Council. So there's site selectors there, developers, those kind of things. And then we're also part of Mid-America Economic Development Council, right? So many acronyms. And that's a lot of site selection and just really attending conferences with peers from other states to find out what they're doing too with recruiting efforts.
Question here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative.
So help me with, there's some amazing places that house international businesses, companies who have a pretty large footprint here in the US as well. Are you familiar with the conference called MIPIM? It's in France. And there's realtors in Jackson who attend. There's governments, local governments, state governments who all attend from all the states, and they go to France. And these are multi-billion-dollar companies looking for a Wyoming, an Arizona. They're looking for this unique experience. And I know personally of some city of San Diego went and they met and they turned around and got immediately multi-billion-dollar investment. So are we doing anything that we're going outside of what we've been doing, same old, and not getting new results? So my question is, are we pushing the boundaries? Are we getting out there?
Your travel budget accommodate France?
We can figure out a way to, Brandon Marshall. I'm the services director at the Wyoming Business Council. And Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, I think I'll answer your question first because it's more fun, if that's all right. Absolutely. If we can figure out a way for it to be an export event, we have some federal funds that will pay for you to go to France. But yeah, so Representative Duncan, I think it's a really important thing to have different opportunities and to look at different shows. And I think and it's not just trade shows, right? It's different efforts. It's looking at how we recruit different. It's using networks that legislators have, that connections even the governor may have, or literally anyone in Wyoming that's in business and their connection to a supplier or a company that could potentially make sense in Wyoming. But I think that that's the key word, is make sense in Wyoming. And I think what we want to do is, when we're looking forward as to what types of events we want to attend in our efforts, it's really down to what companies make the most sense in Wyoming. And I think that's what we're seeking to do right now, is go forward with what we're proposing to be a significant effort in targeting industries and targeting specific to communities and regions, so that we really are investing in exact right things. It's you mentioned rare earth minerals. There could be opportunity in that, but we don't know exactly what that opportunity is, and we don't have the funding to shotgun the world and hope to land on it. The show you mentioned in France could potentially be a great opportunity for us, or a much smaller show in Canada with, perfectly matched companies could be a good opportunity for us. We want to be able to find these things. And that's truly one of the things we're proposing, is to be able to study this in depth and make a real deep a deep dive into what makes sense in the individual areas of the state. Right now, we have almost exactly $242,000 a year recruiting budget. A few years ago, it was roughly $500,000, and a few years before that, it was probably closer to the $800,000 range. So what you can do with that is limited. We have figured out how to do things cheaper. We have figured out how to be at shows with a great, beautiful presence, and save a few $1,000s every time we're there, just by not shipping crates, silly things like that. But it is necessary for us to make sure that we're absolutely targeting the perfect thing perfect is probably impossible, but the closest thing to what's the best fit and the most likely fit in the state. So, but yeah, we're absolutely always looking for new opportunities for promotion events. And one of the things is, we want to depend on the local economic developers and work with them to figure out what those things are. I think that's a change, going from the statewide organization with statewide targets of the industries to being able to work directly with communities and pump the local recruiting effort with us and have it be more of a team concept versus us and them. So.
Very good. Thank you. Carry on. Oh, question from Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask about coal exports. What is the WBC doing on coal exports? I was talking yesterday with this Dr. Horner about some of his ideas on how we could export coal around coal trains. And, the defeatism around coal is really frustrating to me. So what has the WBC done to export our coal?
Does that fit this questions, or have you got another area, or you want to answer that one now?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman
Oh, okay.
and Representative Gray. I can answer it in my tenure. The answer is not much. I can tell you in the last 18 months that I've been here, the efforts to do that are really centered around what we're doing with Taiwan and Japan in that area, but not much.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I just think we really got to ramp up our efforts on coal and getting access to markets. And there's some really creative work. And if the WBC could, I'll connect you. And there's some really good work on that. And we got to look at this. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So I guess thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I guess to sort of put a little bit of moving forward type of a look at recruiting, which is the next part of the question. I think Brandon really hit on it well, which is, we could go out and do a shotgun approach into other areas. But one of the things that we are going to do is that targeted industry study to understand the communities, the regions, the assets that we have that we can build upon, and then be very selective. I think, as you can see with the budget of $242,000, that trip to France might actually be kind of challenging based on all of my European travels. You take half the clothes and double the money is the way I've always heard it. And that doesn't go very far. So all jokes aside, I think we can understand that recruiting can be expensive. And so we want to do it in a targeted fashion. Absolutely. We'd like more resources to do that. And so I think that's an important component. I think it's also important to realize that, we're obviously going to do industry studies, but we also have industries that are coming to us and that are here and coming here. I think we heard quite a bit on yesterday's discussions around the nuclear economy, as well as touring the SER and seeing things like the coal products, as well as some of the rare earths and things like that. Those may be targeted industries. Obviously, one of them has to be, and we're excited about that opportunity around nuclear. But it has to be an area that we focus on, because we do have some opportunities there. And I think that's where those industry studies will tell us what is that opportunity, how do we go and attack it best? Because again, we do need to be careful with our investments there.
Yeah, question.
Thank you,
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my whole point of bringing up France was a collaborative effort by local government, state government, Wyoming Business Council, individual businesses, private industry, to work together, private partner, public partnership, in essence, going to something like this and be able to make a presence. So the other part that is real disturbing for me as a person who is a business owner and who works in marketing, advertising daily, we're targeting the perfect entity for the state of Wyoming. That gets my hackles up. We don't know what the perfect industry is for the state of Wyoming. And if you're marketing and you are advertising the state of Wyoming, you need to be creative, you need to be innovative, and you need to be open to things you didn't think of, possibilities. So I really worry that we have a narrow focus because of our budget. We can collaborate with private, we can collaborate with local governments, local economic development, all of that, in order to really expand our boundaries and our ideas of what could come, because there might be something out there that we never thought of. It happens every day in my business. So wouldn't you agree?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
Representative Duncan. Yes, thank you.
I don't know how successful we'll be with France since that Louisiana purchase. They're still mad about that, I think.
Some of us don't remember.
Yeah, yeah, you don't. Okay, moving right along.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to continue into a discussion around non-infrastructure funding options, which was brought up. I'll let Brandon and Wendy go. Thank you. Thank you for your help.
Kind of the moving chairs kind of the thing here.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do a bit of musical chairs. I want to highlight some of the expertise we have. But we want to talk a little bit about non-infrastructure funding options. And I think we touched on it a little bit with recruiting, but it's not just in recruiting that I think it's important to understand the non-infrastructure funding options that we're talking about. And one of the things that we feel very strongly about, and I think we've touched on it a few times, is we want to understand the problem that we're solving and the asset that we have to leverage and how to do that best. Because while we want to make sure that we're keeping our options open and things like that, we also know that we do have limited budgets, and we want to make sure that the investments that we make take the state forward as far as we can. And so one of the things that we did is we took a look, and in our discussions with businesses and communities over the years, as well as very recently, we did some surveying and to understand the problems that those groups face. And so we started to look at ways to help businesses and communities expand and recruit businesses in their areas. And so we took a look at a number of different options. And so you'll see a document entitled Non-Infrastructure Funding Program Options. And you'll see that we took a look at a few different elements here. And so we wanted you to be able to kind of look at some of these ideas and consider them and ask questions. We wanted to look at, we could start first with a closing fund. I think that is an element that we face each time we're in any sort of competition with a business who's looking to relocate. And in some cases, even businesses that are looking to expand within our state may be courted by other states as well, because it turns out that the businesses that we have in Wyoming are being courted to leave as well. So, I guess we look at things from a problem statement first. And so the first thing is that business owner who's looking to relocate their business, they need their assistance to pay for operations, moving operations, as well as equipment, and they want to be able to continue to operate while they're in that relocation process. And other states offer that incentive. I think if you go back to, we can call it Avalon or we can call it Company X, whichever you prefer. But if you look at by the numbers and you look at the amount of money that Avalon contributed in their equipment costs, their moving expenses, and keeping their operations going during the fact that they were moving, I think you could see that it's not a small bill. And so we want to be able to make it as easy as possible to move or expand in Wyoming. And we see this closing fund as an opportunity to do that.
Quick question here.
It will be quick. Mr. Rowell, looking at this, of course, there's constitutional issues about the grants directly to private industry. However, I think a loan program where, so you do a bridge loan for moving, initial setup expenses, and then what you do is you engage in a forgiveness of that loan as they hit targets. That is, they actually locate and purchase X number of dollars worth of equipment that they have secured a lease or building within the community, that they've paid X number of dollars in taxes, and then work that so that is that cash flow transition, which is needed by a lot of companies. But then we tie it to what is the benefit of the state, and the benefit of the state is they are buying equipment in the state. They are paying sales tax on that equipment, depending on what exemptions are there, but still, and then also employ and have lived up to their end of the bargain. And so I'd encourage us to think about something along those lines in order to fill this type of gap, which I know could be very attractive for businesses. Your thoughts on that?
Mr. Chairman and
Yes.
Representative Greer, yes, that's this whole idea of essentially pay for performance and helping them out, but then having them hit targets and be forgivable loans. I think that's an excellent opportunity to explore. That's not just an idea that we've had here in this setting, but it has been brought to our attention from other businesses throughout the state who are willing to do such a thing. So that's a great thing. Yeah, thank you. We'll go ahead and continue with some of these, and I'll say to Josh and Ron, if you have additional things that you'd like to add, just please let me know and we'll jump right in. The next thing that we've looked at is this idea of existing business expansion partnership, and one of the things that, and it's similar to the relocation element. But as a business looks to transition or take advantage of new opportunities within their industry, or if they're looking to pivot to change, one of the things that's very challenging for them is the ability to reskill their workforce, to be able to buy new equipment, or even to do studies to understand that market and whether they can fit. And that, of course, none of those things are infrastructure. So we are challenged by that. And so that is an opportunity for Wyoming businesses who are already here, who are already succeeding, to be able to stay sustainable for the next 20, 30 years rather than just today. And I think that's another element. And as Representative Greer might have touched on, maybe that's an element to do that sort of loan pay for performance and loan forgiveness type of a situation. Now, obviously, there are other ways to slice that, and looking at partnerships with the other entities throughout the state that can help with those. I think one of the things that we have seen over the course of the time here is making sure that we're connected to all of the elements that can help a business. We do have a vast array of entities, whether that be at the university system, the community college system, or some of the other programs and agencies throughout the state that can help. And sometimes it's just a matter of connecting those companies and promoting, as we've said here today, making sure that people know what services are available. So marketing that.
Quick question here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Duncan.
So Josh, when you're talking about these different studies, research, different potential things that current businesses may need, is there any cooperation or work with, say, any of the community colleges or the University of Wyoming Business department or anything to be able to help out and collaborate and do something like that as a help for businesses, or to connect them with those resources?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, yes, the Business Resource Network is actually is one of our largest partners. In fact, we fund that. That's one of the things that we spend the most money on is the Business Resource Network, and also we are very closely tied to all of the agencies throughout the state that are related to economic development. That's become even more clear over the last year and a half, as we've all faced, pretty big challenges that each of these businesses faced during COVID, and looking at the ARP funding and how we can do that. So yeah, that's absolutely important to us. If we already have it and we can connect people to it, we need to be doing that. I think there are opportunities to improve that, absolutely, and we're working closely with them to do that.
Follow up, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to follow up on that, when you create or when you have a research about a particular area, subject matter, whatever, for a business, are you archiving that and it's available for other businesses that may need the same information and have access to that for the public to be able to go in and look on their own? I mean, like on your website, as far as research references, anything like that, is that available?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan, it is not available today. as part of the website redo that we're undertaking now, those are elements that we want to make available to the state, because if we're going to use it and use it for one company, I'm sure there are other companies that can benefit from it. So thank you for that.
Go ahead.
Another element that we're working on right now is something called the SSBCI, which is a loan program that the federal government is allotted Wyoming $56 million to be able to utilize that money within their communities and develop businesses there. We're actually awaiting Treasury guidance, which should be here by the end of the year, to take advantage of that program and understand how that works. That's a very exciting thing that we're attacking over the next few years. So that's something that we'll be able to use as well. One of the things that we also look at is not just businesses, but those communities and making sure that we can help those communities take advantage of the programs and the funding mechanisms that are out there. One of those is the non-infrastructure match fund, and making sure that those communities that need to take advantage of them have the ability to match the funds that they're getting. I think that's an important thing for those communities that maybe don't have as an established economic development situation, and being able to build programs around that and take advantage of a lot of the funding that is out there, especially those federal funds that they might need to have a match for, and also the infrastructure to do all of the reporting and tracking that is necessary for that. And with that, I'm going to pause for a moment and see if there are any questions on those non-infrastructure funding options, and see if there are any other ideas that this committee may have as well, based on those problem statements.
I think we've given you some ideas,
Yep,
France and everywhere else. We've given you all kinds of ideas. Go ahead, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So where do we go from here? Okay, it's August. It'll be February soon. And we've talked a lot, but where do we go from here? What do I think we've got to get a plan together. We're running out of time in order to have anything workable for the next session. And so what are your thoughts? I mean, I guess we can spend next summer talking about it. I've got one more year on this committee, but.
Yeah, Chairman Anderson and Representative Greer, yes, I think that the thoughts are now is to take these problem statements, the ideas that we've all come up with, and then put some numbers and some potential funding sources to them. I think that's the next step, and I think that between now and November, I think is a good time to begin to flesh that out.
Follow up here.
Well, but most of your programs are statutorily derived. So that requires legislation. This committee's never typically drafted legislation on the fly at its last meeting and presented it to the legislature as other committees do, because we take a great deal of pride in our work and we want good legislation. So that leaves us without a lot of time to move forward with. So we really do need a plan, but we want a plan that works with you, that has your vision, that is something to reform this for the state of Wyoming, to make this workable for 2021 going forward, and take these plans that have developed over the last 20 years. They need to be refreshed, revitalized, and effective.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Greer, I couldn't agree more. I think part of the planning may be in utilizing some of the funds that we know are coming our way through ARP, and being able to run some of these programs in that manner. If there's no opportunity to create that policy between now and then, I guess we'll have to fill the gap there.
But a question from Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to back up a little bit, when you were talking about your website, Wyoming Business Council's website should be the most robust, in my personal opinion, should be the most robust, best website advertise in the state of Wyoming for businesses and resources and things like that. So what's your timeframe? When is that going to be in place for people to be able to utilize right away?
Mr. Durrell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Duncan. We recently selected a vendor for that, and our target is to have a lot of that done by the end of the calendar year. And now whether it will be I guess I would have to know what the other competing websites are to say that we're the most robust and most visited. But it is our intent to have resources that, as you mentioned, that are available to people to do their economic development and to know what programs we have. So yeah, thank you for your support, I suppose.
Follow up here. Follow up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So robust meaning enough information that the do-it-yourselfer, the person who's thinking about it, can go in and get a lot of the resources rather than phone calls and things. Because I can tell you right now, the industry is across industries, most people are going to the internet, going to the resource before they ever call you. And so if we don't have that information out there to speak for us so that it's out there doing the work for us so that we don't ever have to talk to them on the phone, that's the best. And so all the resources, all the information, what we've talked about all day today, that putting out there those incentives that we're paying more, the state of Wyoming is giving more than what we're telling them that we're giving. So if we don't have that message out there and it's not out there clear and concise where someone can get all that information without actually picking up the phone and talking to you, then we're failing. And so that's my point, is that I want to make sure that we, not only that it's user friendly. So if it's not user friendly and intuitive, do you, whoever you're using, have the capability to go back in and tweak it without an exorbitant cost like some of these vendors do? So I just want to make sure we have that in mind. Thank you.
Mr. Durrell, do you have that in mind? I have one over here before you.
I just wanted to follow up on that.
Go ahead. Over here. Go ahead. Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I did want to follow up on that point. I think in the legislature, create the limitations that make our websites lousy. It's us. It's the fact that we under appropriate for that. We provide a selection process, which makes it RFP based. Any revision is a further RFP. This is something I've run into year in, year out, time and again, and we're fighting with a lot on the blockchain select committee. The fact that we want to add one more column to a database and we get $1 million quote. We created this problem, and I don't know if you have the flexibility, honestly, to be dynamic and to create a website that is exactly what we want to have for industry. We struggle with this, obviously, on travel and tourism. They have more flexibility. Because we've kind of worked to give them more flexibility. So the question I would have is, and please be candid about this, are we holding you back on this request that Representative Duncan is asking? Because if we've created a circumstance where you can't have the website that she's asking for, we need to know that so that we can fix that. And I know that we've done it elsewhere, and I know that we're often the problem, but when we're the problem, we need to know we're the problem.
Mr. Durrell, would you like to weigh in on that?
So if Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, the question is, are you the problem?
Yeah. Yes.
Seems a bit loaded, but I'll go ahead and take a stab at it. In this particular case, the requirements, the procurement requirements are not the problem. We do have the flexibility that we need to make those things happen. I do believe that one of the problems is that, perhaps it's a personality flaw of mine, but I'm not a big complainer. But I'll tell you right now, we lost 3 positions in our communications group last year in July as part of our step 2 reduction. So while I would love to have the most robust website on the planet and be able to do all of these things, we also have to do that with less. And so we have to, and I coming from the technology sector, Representative Duncan, I can't agree more. That's how people go and find information. And the challenge that we are facing right now is that we are doing a lot more with a lot less. And so if you would, one of the problems that we face is in the resources that are required to do such a thing. Our rules are flexible. We do have the procurement ability to make decisions and to do things without a lot of oversight, without a lot of the things that maybe other agencies face. So I don't think it's that. But I definitely know 100% it is resourcing.
If you want to make a change a few months from now, how do you go about doing that? Do you have the internal expertise? Are you getting a content management system, which will allow you to have dynamic ability to make changes to that content within the confines of the CMS?
Yep, Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, one of the elements is that we will be trained up on how to make changes on our own, and that the basic changes we'll be able to make, because again, your website can't be static and you can't put out an RFP every time you have to change a page.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep.
Good. Representative Burkhart, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Director, this is somewhat of a follow-up to Co-Chairman Greer's question. And I apologize in advance if I'm a little grumpy. Kind of hit a nerve though, in effect saying we're going to see what ARPA funds bring. What are your plans? What do you need disregarding the ARPA funds if they didn't exist?
Mr. Durrell, do you have a line on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, I don't have the exact ask right now.
Follow up? Director, when will you have it?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Burkhart, that's what I was saying for November.
Mr. Chairman, but I think November is a little late. I think all of us to draft legislation, we need to be doing it now, ready to go and evaluate and work and that for the November meeting.
Maybe that request goes to the JAC though, not through a bill. But about have to, because we wouldn't have time to do a bill. But the JAC has time to do it. Mr. Greer.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Burkhart, for saying part of what I've been sitting here debating if I have an obligation to say, and I think I do. My concern is that, we talk about the SSBCI program, federal funds. We talk about ARPA funds. I don't see a single member here from the governor's office. And again, the Wyoming Business Council and the programs established by it have been done by the legislature. We're the ones that have pushed through the funding. And so I get a little concerned when I read between the lines that we're just going through the executive branch, take all these funds and set up programs that don't fit into a greater scheme that's thought out and vetted through. This is a great committee to work with. Okay. But you've got everything from criticism to unbelievable support. That's a good committee to work through. And I just hope we don't go down that path, because I don't think come February it'll work out very well. And so I would just simply ask that we keep working hard. There's nothing saying that we can't throw something together and get some information out to our committee members with some ideas. There's nothing saying that Senator Anderson and I can't request some drafts to look at, circulate those for our committee to discuss, and be very prepared to do this, I think, the correct way with the legislature being involved. Let us do the lift. Let us help you. So hopefully I've said that as nice as I can. So thank you.
Wouldn't you agree? Yeah. Senator Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I apologize for my voice. I'll speak as loudly as I can. I don't see a vision from the Business Council, a direction for growth. And I think that's what everybody here is asking for. As we're here, we're trying to help, and you're not giving us a direction that you want to go. I see, when I walked through this building yesterday, I saw some fascinating projects going on that are ready for marketing, and you don't have a marketing plan that you're trying to put in front of us so that we can help you develop it. Can you bring those things to us? Can you bring us a larger vision of where the business council ought to go? We need to be marketing globally. We need to be marketing nationally. We probably need a marketing firm to come into Wyoming, look at everything we have business-wise and opportunity-wise for the world to get them here. And we've got this little narrow scope of the perfect business. The perfect business isn't out there, like Representative Duncan said. Can you put some visions together of what you'd like to see the business council be? Because all I see is a little narrow path that you're headed down, rather than global growth and really what, we don't even have a marketing plan for coal. I can't understand that. We don't have a marketing plan for rare earths. And those are the kind of things that I think the business council should be helping to develop, and we're not. So I'd like to see us work with you to, and I realize it's going to cost a lot of money to go do something like that, but that's an investment in Wyoming that we may be able to make if you can bring us a vision of what you think your group should be doing. We have a vision of what we think you should be doing, and we've got two ends of the table here. I'm not seeing all of us working together. We want something more from you, I guess. I feel like I do. I feel like that's what Representative Gray and Representative Duncan were saying. So that would be my question. Can you bring us a vision for growth?
Senator Cooper, I think some of those things you're referring to, the legislature has allocated to other groups like the Wyoming Energy Authority and those kind of things, not the business council. Business council is to bring in businesses into Wyoming, maybe not exporting coal or LNG or that kind of things, but we have groups that are working on that. So I'm not sure their vision is going to include what you're looking for, but we do have organizations that have that vision. So maybe they wouldn't answer every one of your questions.
Follow up on that.
Yeah,
sir.
sure.
If that's the case, and I do believe it is, it's still business development. And I feel like this business council should be working hand in hand with those groups, and we're not seeing that. Is that part of the vision that you should have together, and how do we develop that?
I hate to answer everything for you.
Mr. Chairman,
It's over to you.
may I answer that one?
Yeah, sure.
Because one, I completely agree with you, and I would be happy to do so, present that vision. And in terms of working with those groups, we do. In fact, we regularly work with the Energy Authority and the School of Energy Resources. We have a standing call, and our teams are working together right now to develop the economies that you're talking about. So we need to beat our chest more and present that vision to you so you can help us out. I'm happy to do that as well. So I'm happy to. And to address Representative Greer's comments, I have no intent of doing it any other way but through this committee. And I think that's really, really important. So we're eye to eye on that. I guess what I could do is apologize for not providing that vision to you, sir, and the rest of this committee, because we have it and we're executing it, but I'll do a better job of presenting it to you so that you have it and you can help out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I got Western. Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And my comment is in regards to the good country lawyer and some of his concerns about vision. Where do we go from here, given the time we have? I'm worried we might be getting a little bit too much into the abstract here. I think if we build on the discussion that we had back in June, looking at the programs that the Biz Council has, what's working, what's kind of working, what's not working at all, getting rid of the things that aren't working, revamping the things that need modification, and leaving or only doing, cosmetic stuff to the things that are working well, just keeping it focused on that. So whether related to Representative Burkhart's comments, whether they get a ton of ARP money or not through this SSBI venues, we've laid the foundational work so that whether they get $0 or they get, 50 million or whatever it is, we've got these programs ready to deploy this money on the ground. So I think just bringing it back down to the conversation what we've worked on and kind of continuing the work that we did last meeting. I guess to kind of bring it back down to the here and now, getting on the question that's been referenced multiple times this morning of, okay, where do we go in the here and now between this moment, our next meeting, and obviously session next year. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good comments. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as we're kind of philosophizing a little bit about where we need to go and how we need to get there, I wanted to share some thoughts that we've all talked about, but I wanted to make sure that they were discussed here in this meeting. I've been involved in this committee and working with the Business Council for 11 years now, and appreciate the work, appreciate the effort, understand how difficult it is, and also understand that a lot of the challenges are coming from the fact that we've provided cuts to budget, we've made things more difficult, and we've also put together some very good programs, I think, that have been used well. So it's a mixed bag, I would say, over the years. But there are a couple things that year in, year out, I've wanted to see and still don't see. First and foremost is key performance indicators that are clear and unambiguous as to whether or not a project was a success for the state, for the county, and for the local community. Every one of those should check box green and to call it a success. So we report back figures, but we don't look at ROI, and we don't look at sort of 10-year yield on projects to assess and look back. And we've never done that, and I've never seen that. So we always see kind of a scattershot of numbers, but I think getting back at what Chairman Greer was looking at, it would be great if every project had a very clear, uniform template that provided sort of this is the cost in certain formats, in grants, in loans, and overall the internal return on investment that we could qualify as the state of Wyoming. We should also be very thoughtful, I think, as we do that, as we set up our key performance indicators, that we're aspiring towards those key performance indicators at all times. And if a project doesn't look like it's going to achieve those outcomes, we don't need that project. We don't need everyone here. We're the easiest dance partner, I think, because we seem to want to dance with everyone. Not every business is good for the state of Wyoming in terms of long-term return on investment. It's almost always good for the local community, but as a member of the Education Committee, every kid costs about $250,000. Good luck covering that, and it's a challenge. We don't have an easy tax structure to provide a return on investment, so we need to understand that. So those key performance indicators that we're always looking at, we get used to them, we understand them, and we evaluate projects through that lens over time. I mean, it's a very engineering solution, but it's what we should do. At the same time, when you set forward those key performance indicators, those performance indicators need to be towards a mission, which gets at what Senator Cooper is looking for. Not just a vision, but an actual mission. What are we trying to achieve? That's largely up to us, but we don't provide clarity for what you're supposed to achieve. The governor doesn't provide direct clarity, although we can do that through some sort of a strategic plan. Is it to sell coal, or is it to diversify the economy? If you ask each of us, you'll get, what do we have here today? 13. You get 13 different answers. It would be good if you probably had one vision statement that those key performance indicators were going towards, and we're implementing that and executing it stably over time. We create challenges for that. But and my view that from 2009 through 19 pre-pandemic, when you rank the states in terms of economic growth, Wyoming was dead last. We had the worst economic growth. In real dollars, we had negative growth for 10 years as a state. It's about a $5 billion shortfall relative to a reasonable percent growth, not even keeping up with the average of the country. So I see a $5 billion shortfall, and I want to know how we make that up effectively. And you contemplate our decline in minerals, coal, oil, and gas. it's reasonable for us to be aspiring to a $5 billion moonshot effectively as the state of Wyoming. That's one vision. I don't know whether that ends up being the vision. That's my vision of what I've always wanted to see is something on that order, as well as a recognition as part of that vision that we have a massive team. It isn't just the business council. We have our local economic development corporations, our main streets. We have all of the other entities that if they're working together, you've got different tiers, so to speak, of who's landing which group, and communications can be a real key in that, particularly when you're becoming understaffed due to the fact that we keep cutting your budget. It's helpful, I think, to improve that communications and rely on your team around the state. So when we have those, the communication network, the vision, and the performance indicators, the question for us, what we need to know is what are the tools to allow you to implement that? What are the resources and tools? That's the legislation we should be putting forward that enables those things and gets you the resources. And that's the onus upon us. But if we don't have that clarity, I think that becomes the challenge for us to draft the legislation where we don't know exactly how to get there from here. And I'll stop there and ask for comments and thoughts.
Thank you for keeping that brief. Yeah. Mr. Durrell, would you like to answer some of that?
You bet I can, Mr. Chairman, and Senator Rothfuss, well said. So perhaps the letter was needed to be a little bit more deep on the content of today's discussion, because all of those things are happening. So in January of this year, we began 3 major projects internally at the Business Council in order to define our services that we deliver, in order to develop an investment thesis and a scorecard, just as you mentioned, and to also make sure that we are communicating that out through our partners. That is going on. That is happening. Today, we were coming here to explain the programs that we have, talk about problem statements and potential solutions for the things that we see in the businesses that we have, and provide some clarity on those programs based on our previous meeting. Do we have a deficit in the exact solutions as has been mentioned? Yes, we do. However, the elements that you're talking about in terms of a scorecard, we are developing that, but also we are saying no. If you look at from March of 2020, when my first board meeting was to develop and to decide on projects, we began saying no to business committed projects that didn't make sense for our state. So that is happening. And so the elements that you're talking about are going on. Perhaps I didn't read between the lines enough, and that's on me. On what we should have provided today in terms of the full vision and all of the elements that we're working on right now to do what you're asking. But we came with the information that you required previously, and we've delivered, perhaps not very clear, but in a way that we can at least begin that conversation. So those things are happening. We do see the collaboration with this committee is incredibly important. And I think, as you mentioned, we all kind of get excited about all of the big things that can happen, but it definitely comes down to resources. And we have policy, funding, and leadership. Well, the resources in leadership is one of the things that we need help with. We are down to 33 people in our agency. Now, a lot of the things that we've mentioned are really, and our budget's not very big. So to do all of the things that we're being asked to do, I think we're doing an okay job. Can we do better? Well, those key performance indicators are probably going to show us. If that's what we were walking into today, I apologize for not knowing and not having the information you guys needed. So with that, I appreciate your comments, and I'll definitely be listening to them back and making sure we take care of all of those. So thank you. From the discussions, you understand why we have you on the agenda for an entire morning so that we can go through all these things. And maybe next meeting, we'll flesh out some of those. Yep. Mr. Chairman, yeah. And by the way, we're about halfway through. Really? Yeah, you're welcome.
I got you about 9/10 of the way through.
So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
And I just want to reiterate this point, and what Senator Rothfuss said was well said. you are our number one. Review of the Wyoming Business Council and programs was the number one interim topic for the Minerals Committee. Dedicated a whole morning in the first meeting. We've had several meetings leading up to this. There was a reason for that. And the reason for that is that many of us feel that it is very important that we continue with the Wyoming Business Council. But there are those who don't believe that. So, I mean, what we're doing, and so I get our frustration, okay, just so you understand, Josh, our frustration is a matter of we feel as if we're moving too slow. And we're concerned that we're not going to be able to do our job as a policymakers to be able to continue to have the Wyoming Business Council be the best it can be. That's where our concern comes from. It's not a personal attack on you. We're not attacking any of your personnel. We're not attacking any of the programs. That's where we're coming from. Okay, our projects, I shouldn't say, we are taking programs, but the projects. So this is a cooperative effort, and there's a greater good associated with it. So that's our frustration.
Okay, moving right along, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And wouldn't I agree? Yes, I would agree.
Yeah, okay.
I think the next piece that we're going to cover is the challenge loan program, the draft legislation. So I'll turn that over to Josh Keefe. Oh, yeah, my mistake. It looks like we want to start with the BRC bill. Mr. Fuller, is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, we'll proceed however you desire.
All right, let's go with this challenge partnership loan fund options, and then we'll move to the bills.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, at the last meeting, it was as we took the deep dive into the Business Council, it was asked, what could we change to make the programs better? And so I had brought some suggestions at the Casper meeting on how to do that. And now we have a draft bill in front of us at the moment, which is 22 LSO-90. And so with that, in this, you can see the summary there where it talks about some of the tweaks and changes, certain things on how to go about that. And so, Mr. Chairman, I don't know, would it be best to work the bill? Is that what you'd like to do? Or what would you like to do?
We're just going to get comments quickly, and then LSO is going to go over the bill. So don't spend too much time on the bill.
Yes, sir. All right. I did review the bill. There were a couple of comments that I had. One of them is on page 2, line 17. It states, and I'm paraphrasing, for which the business or the business's lender has secured through a federal guaranteed loan to guarantee repayment. One of the things with this program was that we were trying to consolidate the bridge loan program and the guaranteed loan program into one and make it easily understandable for everybody. My suggestion would be that we not require a federal guaranteed piece of that. Because I think just based upon past experience and history, I would say that maybe 10% of the loans that I did in my previous life had a federal guarantee. And so I think that would really kind of handcuff the success of the program if we required that. And so my suggestion would be that we remove that wording if we could.
Okay.
Moving on to the next section, page 3, line 2. I was confused perhaps on the changing of the language where it says, and the business does not contribute at least 50% of the total project cost. My intent would be that we keep the down payment from the business to a minimum of 15%. I think, again, if we require a 50% down payment from the business, that's going to be a really tough thing to accomplish. And so my suggestion would be that we just leave it as it is with that language, so that we can try and make that successful in our partnership with a local bank or financial institution.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah,
can-
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Fuller, were you thinking that that 50% would be other sources other than?
Mr. Chairman, at least, and Mr. Chairman, Chairman Greer, for that 50%, I took that to mean, the business contributes 50%. It's silent on the sources.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Let me see. The next comment really just comes at on the challenge loan piece specifically. Back on page 6, line 15. I know that this is the contract lending program. Perhaps we had set a maximum at $100,000. I'm not sure that that's enough. My suggestion would maybe be $200,000. I think that will help fill the gap in the niche in the market that we're searching for. It seems like many of the requests are somewhere between $100,000 and $2,000 from phone calls that I receive from various companies around the state. On page 6, line 15.
Go ahead.
And then I believe that those are my only real discussion points with this. I thought Mr. Fuller did a great job actually capturing a lot of tweaks and complicating factors. Oh, one other piece that I forgot to mention was in the actual challenge loan program, it's not in this bill, but there is, it was not talked about in decreasing the amount of down payment from local EDOs. That was the 80-20 split that I had suggested at the last meeting, where instead of it being a cash match program from the local economic development organization, it would be an 80-20 split where they'd bring 20% and the state would be willing to lend 80% on that in conjunction with the local entity.
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Josh, so real quick, on the succession portion of that, clarify for me, please, that yes, you have to have 2 rejections by financial institutions, but in rule, you have it set, I'm hoping, that they have to be creditworthy, all those kinds of things versus being in the statute. Hopefully you have all that clarified in your rules and such. Yes, no?
Chairman Anderson.
Yes.
Representative Duncan. Yes, that's correct. I would fully plan on underwriting it just as if it was a normal good credit worthy debt instrument. I think the real struggle with that, I think we all know, is the collateral piece of that. And so one thing to perhaps discuss with the committee is, and to be honest with you, I think I expressed my own internal conflict on how best to do this program if we have a financial institution involved or not. The financial institution is going to want the secured piece of the loan. I have heard feedback from them already, and they would want us to take the unsecured piece or the blue sky. And then I think my battle internally as a former banker is that I want my hands on as much as I can get. And so I don't know what the committee's feeling is on that. I'm willing to do whatever you would like me to do. But I'd be happy to hear your guys' opinions and what you would like to hear and see happen with that, should it be successful.
Representative Greer.
For the program to have any chance of success, which seemed to be popular with this committee, you're going to have to subordinate to the lender. So I mean, otherwise the program will never even get a look, would be my guess. And we would prefer, we would strongly prefer to have a bank involved, even if the bank only took the first 50%, because that relationship exists, that continued communication exists, that review of the accounts exists, which the business council doesn't have the resources for. Josh, we know, I mean, you just don't. So loans that where you're participating with banks would be the far superior loans. So that would be my view of it.
Yes.
And
Senator
I just want to
Rothfuss.
pile on that comment. I do always feel more comfortable, and I think it's just easier for us to be piling on, so to speak, with existing loans where the due diligence is done by a lending institution, and that obviates a lot of the work of the business council, and you can feel comfortable with it. So anytime we can get in a position where we take advantage of that, it's just easier for us to confidently apply the resources and dedicate the resources. And honestly, that's probably the fastest path to us making it less bureaucratic as well, because if we can get the lending institution, which has an incentive to act both diligently and quickly, to feel comfortable putting up 50%, then that should lower the bureaucratic burden on us to be doing our due diligence as well. And if we're not doing it that way, we should really give some more thought to the ways that we can expedite a process where we have that external match. And I think based on your experience, you could probably feel comfortable with that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Bear has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Keefe, it seems to me, I agree with these statements that have just been made about us working with a bank, but we are requiring 2 loans to be denied before we get to this point. So are we creating kind of a mixed deal here? We want to work with a bank, yet we want 2 banks to have denied the loan first?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Representative Bear. So I think the way that it's written right now, it's my understanding that we would be the sole party lending the money. And so that is the reason that the clause is in there requiring the 2 denials. Now, if we are participating with a local financial institution, I think we can strike that from the bill, knowing that it has been accepted by a local financial institution and that we are happy to participate if we would like. So that it's just written as if we're the only ones doing it right now. But if we are not, then I think we can strike that from the bill.
Representative Greer.
So we'll vote on this next meeting, but this is a great discussion, because I do feel strongly about participating with local banks on it. What I think we do is we can, maybe we don't go to 2, but at least get 1 rejection letter for the full amount of the purchase. And then we could even go further if we really wanted to, is just say that there'll be a preference for those loans where local banks participate, which is something we've never done before, but just a thought to first think about until next time.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to kind of touch on Representative Bear and Chairman Greer's comments, I think absolutely having that partnership with a local bank is good. Senator Office says there's that redundancy and due diligence that they do on the creditworthiness, et cetera. But also, I think it's a model that we know that does work. For example, if you look at the Small Business Administration's loans through the 7A loan program, the 504 loan program, where they do partner with local lenders. And I think for some local lenders, it's not that they think it's a bad project. It's just if they are the sole creditor, they feel that their risk position is too large, where if they can share a certain portion of that with the state, I think banks are just inherently conservative. If they can spread that risk across another institution like the state, I think they see a project that is almost viable becomes very viable if they can share that risk. So.
Wouldn't you agree?
Chairman Anderson, I will echo again and say, yes, I agree. I think that is the whole intent of this section of the statute, is to help mitigate some of that risk and provide an incentive to keep a business going and thriving in a community. So.
Question here, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This morning has been full of rich and intriguing conversations. So thank you to all who've participated thus far. I just didn't want to lose sight of the idea of making improvements to the Challenge Loan Program in the relationship with local EDOs. And so I'd like to see something added maybe on page 4 of the draft bill that changes that the 50-50 to the 80-20 to give more local economic development organizations the opportunity to take advantage of this tool, not just our larger partners. So I just didn't want to lose sight of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there's 2 or 3 areas with the 50-50 in it that I think we would have to change if we want to go to the 80-20. So we'll work that the next meeting. I have 3 of them down so far. Yeah. Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Chairman Anderson, that is all the comments that I have specific to the challenge loan draft legislation. So.
Okay. Yep.
As we wrap up,
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, I wrote these down last time and I can't remember them. What's the balance left? What's the balance left available? And then what's the outstanding balance? Just those 2 numbers. I should know that. I can't remember.
That's okay, sir. Chairman Anderson,
Yeah.
Representative Greer, the current balance available in the challenge loan accounts, roughly $7 million. And as of right now, we have about $16.5 million outstanding in loans spread across 97 loans across the state.
97?
97.
Other question? Other question? What? Yeah. Yeah. It must be at 97. Any other questions? Any other questions for small business, the business council? Any other questions?
Does Mark Larson want to comment on it? Because we don't need to go through this bill again, do we?
I'm going to have the attorneys go through it. Yeah, with
Oh,
all
are you?
3 of them, all
Oh,
3 of
okay.
them. Yeah.
Are we? Yeah, all right.
But I think we got some public comment on this before we,
Or do we just go through the bill?
maybe we go through the bills first and then have the public comment. That'd be all right? All right. Brian, could you just kind of quickly go through these 3 bills we have here that we're going to vote on next meeting? So all of us can get briefed on what they are and how they work so that we're ready for next meeting.
Sure,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chairman. And I will start, since we were just discussing 2012 SO 90, I will start with that bill. This is draft 0.5. This draft would authorize loans for, it would amend the Partnership Challenge Loan Program to authorize loans for business succession and succession planning. It would authorize contract lending loans. It would consolidate the loan guarantee into the bridge financing program, and then it would amend limits for loan amounts under the general loan program. On the changes on pages 2 and 3 are meant to consolidate the guarantee loan participation into the bridge financing program and then rename that program the 50-50 program. I know Mr. Keefe noted the language on line 17 to 19 that came straight from the definition for the guarantee loan program. But upon you and the committee's direction, that can certainly be omitted from the next draft. The language is a little weird because it's structured in the negative. It's the council shall not consider a proposal in which the financing component exceeds 50% of the total project cost, or 2.5 million. And that's an increase from 1 million is the current limit for the existing bridge financing program. And then this draft, as Mr. Keefe noted, would change the business contribution from 15% of the total project cost to 50%. Again, upon committee direction, that can be changed back to the original 15%. On page 3, the guarantee loan participation, that just provides that after July 1st, 2022, there would be no new guarantee loan participations. The definitions on the bottom of 3 and going into 4, those are the definitions that create the 2 new programs in this bill draft. Mr. Chairman, the language that was referred to in terms of the 50-50 split for the community development organizations, that would, or the economic development organizations, that would be inserted on page 5 and can be done so with the next draft if the committee wishes. The language changes on page 5 change the loan limit for an economic disaster loan or for a community development organization from $500,000, that increases to $1 million. The remaining changes are conforming changes in light of the change to the bridge financing program. And then the new language on page 6 would be the new loan limits for the contract financing, currently set at 100,000. And then the succession financing would have a limit of 500,000 per loan for that program. Moving on to the bottom of page 7, this is the subsection that would set the parameters for the contract financing. Similar to the other programs, the Business Council would develop the application, review it as soon as practicable. It would give the state priority over any claim of the business that receives the contract financing loan. And then salient here and different from the other programs, the Business Council can't issue a loan unless the business agrees to assign the proceeds of a contract as collateral. As mentioned before, it would require the business to provide at least 2 letters from financial institutions denying an application or request for financing. After the contract is completed, the council would retain sufficient proceeds to retire the loan and interest and then remit any remaining proceeds to the business. It has an aggregate $1 million limit for all loans issued under this program. And then the Business Council would evaluate whether the contract would have sufficient proceeds to pay off the loan and the likelihood of successfully completing the contract. On page 9, this is the language that creates the succession financing, kind of the same similar general principles. The council cannot issue a loan under this new program unless the business has been in operation for at least the 7 years immediately preceding the application for a loan. The same language regarding the 2 letters, denial letters from financial institutions. The council can require as part of the loan process, the business to pledge revenues from the business as collateral. And then there's an aggregate $5 million limit for loans under this section at any one time. And then, Mr. Chairman, the remaining language is just makes clear the applicability. It applies to any loan issued under the program on or after the effective date. It doesn't affect any guarantee loan participation before July 1st, 2022. And it just requires the Business Council to not issue any or authorize any guarantee loan participation on or after July 1st, 2022. There's a reporting requirement for the Business Council once all guarantee loan participations are completed or concluded. They report back to the committee so the committee can consider whether those statutes should at that point be repealed, and then rulemaking and a split effective date, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. One thing we haven't talked about, page 9, line 12, the idea that no loan under this program shall be issued if the company has not existed for more than 7 years directly preceding the application. Can we talk through the why of that number? Is that still an appropriate number? Should we contemplate changing that, reducing it? Any thoughts?
Do you want to address that, Brian, or is council going to address that?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, that number, that's what I had from my notes. I think that was the number Mr. Keefe mentioned in June. And so I just put that, of course, it's certainly up for the committee to decide.
Mr. Keefe, would you like to address that?
Sure. Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, I'll be honest, it's kind of an arbitrary number. My intent, though, was that we would have a business that would be able to kind of weather the first couple of years that it takes to get a business kind of fully up and running, and that also that it would give us enough financial history in the due diligence in doing these loans that we'd be able to see trends and gauge the level of risk. And so my thought was 7 years would give us enough time for maturation of the business as well as financial history to underwrite it and see if that is something that we would like to invest in or loan out. So.
Okay, all right. All right. It looks like there's quite a few changes that we may have. So I think we'll have quite a few. Yes, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like the good senator from this fine county, that was a number that kind of stuck out to me as well. And obviously I appreciate the value of having more data and returns and stuff to assess past performance. My concern is that that might be a little too arduous. And one could certainly counter that any business needs to have good bookkeeping and should have these documents required that a bank is going to ask for 7 years. I feel like that might be a little excessive, and that might be cutting up potentially good, solid applicants if, let's say they only bought the business after 5 years or some kind of thing. So I think perhaps maybe reducing that number to 4 years or 5 years might be make this program more appealing to potential applicants.
Remember, this is just a challenge loan program. So there's lots of changes that everybody wants to make on this thing. So bring your amendments to the next meeting and we'll work this bill and we'll change what is your pleasure. So with that, we'll go over some more bills here.
Mr. Chairman, could
Yes.
I make a suggestion to
Sure.
LSO? Mr. Fuller, would you please put in the suggested changes by Mr. Keefe as a staff note for us to, I've got those in my copy, but it'd be good to have those in as a staff note as we work the bill.
Yeah, that
Thank
would
you.
be good. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I think even a step further than what the chairman was suggesting, maybe if we can make sure that there's working together where WBC comes back at the next meeting and says, yes, we support everything in this, we want no changes. And staff is comfortable with that and works with them and works with you so that everybody comes and says, yeah, vote for this because we're all in full support. I think that would be a great position. We're late in the game. I'd love to be there when we come to the next meeting. So if we're having any amendments, they're small and based on our discussion as opposed to based on proposals from agencies. So maybe we can get to that point next time.
Can we do that?
Yes, certainly, Mr.
Brian?
Chairman, we can have a draft that incorporates all of these changes just into the draft.
Okay. All right. All right. Let's move on to draft bill number 83 then so that we can get through these. Or which one do you want to go first?
Well, Mr. Chairman, it may make more sense now to go to 91.
Oh, okay.
Because that draft also concerns the challenge loan program and one particular aspect of that program. So this is the challenge loan fueling infrastructure loans portion of that program. And all this bill draft does is expands the program to include electric charging stations and hydrogen fueling stations as permissible uses for that loan. On page 2, that's exactly what happens in the bill. The name of this loan is renamed from natural gas fueling infrastructure loan to charging and fueling infrastructure loan, just to reflect the addition of those two additional energy sources, stations, if you will, as possible for the loan. The remaining changes in the bill draft, Mr. Chairman, are just conforming amendments to reflect the addition of hydrogen and electric charging.
Okay. Any comments from you, Mr. Keefe?
Chairman Anderson, thank you. This program also is one of the few where you'll notice that it does have a $5 million kind of dedication as well to this program, to this specific product, if you will, inside the fund. We have done one of these since it was incorporated. One thing just perhaps for the committee's consideration is this specific product does allow for the business council to lend directly to a business. Now, that does not mean that we've only done one, but it would honestly be just my suggestion that we could structure this specific product to mirror the rest of the challenge loan products where we would have a financial institution involved as well. and perhaps shorten the amount of interest only period and those types of things. So.
Yeah, that would be good if we had a financial institution involved. Any other questions on this one?
Let me ask a question.
Yep.
So Mr. Keefe, and I guess to be a little more specific on that is that we would require a financial institution to pick up a percentage of the project. And what would that percentage be?
Chairman Anderson, Representative Greer, I think if we mirrored it to the other one, I would look to mirror it just like the 50-50 type of program as well. I don't know if I have a great answer for you, honestly, sir. I think I just don't know what the committee's pleasure would be. If you would like us to keep it status quo as the way it is now, we are okay with that. If you would like it to mirror the rest of the products in the fund, we are open to that idea as well. So.
It sounds like the feds are going to put up a lot of money for charging stations. I don't know if but that is not a financial institution that'd be participating with us. It'd be the federal government. So that might be a little different than what we're thinking on a financial institution. Mr. Chairman? Yes. Senator Russ.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think the federal funds will probably provide incentives for this type of infrastructure build out to take place rather rapidly. I think this is a good bill for us to have in place for the additional funding associated with it, where if the federal funds don't cover it, then they have an opportunity to get a loan. I would encourage us to have this drafted so that it's consistent with the other legislation we're working on that provides for the opportunity to participate with a lender, and maybe have that flexibility there. I also don't know whether $5 million ends up being the right answer, but that's an easy amendment if we want to change that next time. And I guess so. I would ask, first of all, whether we want to ask for that change for next time, and I'd support that. So we can talk about that afterwards. But the other is I'd ask the Business Council to vet out that $5 million number and see. I have no idea what a reasonable cost is and what a infrastructure development project is actually going to cost. Is this going to lead to two of them being allowed? So if you could come back to us for the next discussion so that we can have an intelligent conversation around that $5 million, as well as that maximum, isn't it $1 million somewhere? There it is. Yeah, $1 million on a project. Whether that makes sense as well. If you could vet those numbers for us and get back to us. Thank you.
Yes.
Chairman Anderson, Senator Rothfuss, I will tell you, we did have another project slated to be built in Casper. That one, what had happened was the company put in all of the underground infrastructure. The loan request was going to be for the canopies and the pump on top. That one, it did total, they were requesting the full $1 million. And it's my understanding that the total project to do that was almost $2.5 million per station. So
that's useful. Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question to the Business Council specifically regarding this type of thing. Have you guys gotten lots of inquiries to have some kind of loan program available for electric charging stations?
You want to take that, Mr. Keefe?
Chairman Anderson, Representative Western, I personally have not received any questions or business folks out there asking if there is a program specifically for electric or hydrogen or this type of product. But I think as Senator Rothfuss maybe touched on it, it is coming down the pipe, and maybe we can be a little more proactive instead of reactive, as I think sometimes we are, but just my own opinion.
And Mr.
Okay,
Chairman,
yes.
just tagging onto that, I do know of a hydrogen fueling station project that's of interest, for example, that we've had some discussions with, and Josh has been involved in that as well. So it is kicking around a little bit on the hydrogen side.
Okay. All right, that wraps up LSO 91. Oh, yeah, no, it didn't.
Do we want to make that recommendation now, or are we going to work it in a bit? What's the concept of how we want to move forward on this one?
This one's the same as the last one. We're going to work it in November.
Okay, then,
And the changes, we want the same thing. We want to have LSO note the changes that have been discussed, but maybe not necessarily make them. Right?
no, Mr. Chairman, I think we should make them so that the draft that we have in November is the draft that we would want to take action on, or as close to it as possible. So it would be my suggestion that we implement in the next draft, we see the partnership loan approach into this legislation so that we have the opportunity to engage local lenders as a co-lender on the project. And without objection, I think that's how we should move forward.
Will we do that, Brian?
Yes, we can do that, Mr. Chairman. And then, Mr.
Okay.
Chairman, is there any direction as to the amounts that have been discussed?
I think that's an easy change.
Okay.
With the next meeting, we can change those.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then, Mr. Chairman, we do have, I believe, a member of the public, Mr. Larson, who had signed up to comment on this bill.
Oh,
great.
Okay, just on this bill?
That was my understanding. Yes,
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
All right. Yeah, and this Noel is doing it on something else. So do we have Mr. Larson on the?
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Please identify yourself and let's hear your suggestions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Mark Larson with the Wyoming Petroleum Marketers Association. We just wanted to weigh in on draft bill 91 and say thank you for the forward thinking of WBC on that issue. This whole electric charging scenario is changing so rapidly, and as the chairman alluded to, there's $7.5 billion that's being allocated in the infrastructure bill for EV charging build out and other construction. I just wanted to point out to the committee that this is not like the CNG scenario where you had consumers needing to go to a station to obtain product. I want to point out to the committee that the majority of the EV chargers that are now up to 350, 400 mile range will be charging at home. So from our perspective, there's not going to be a huge clamoring of my marketers to go out and put in a DC fast charging facility because of that notion that most of the people will be fueling up at home. I hope that some of these infrastructure loans will be allowed also for residential areas if we see the EV targets and mandates being met, because that is where we're going to see a need as well. So what that does is that relegates the majority of the fast charging scenario to the traveling public. As the committee knows, there's 15 Tesla fast charging facilities throughout the state, but most of those are at motels, or as you see in Cheyenne, there's one out at the mall. Unfortunately, those are not being built yet. More to my point, I wanted to say that the business case just isn't there yet. So while we appreciate the business council moving forward on and including this at a point where we will have that in a toolbox, it's important to recognize that there's the chairs on the deck are shifting daily. There's a federal credit now of up to 30%, maximum of $30,000 for a fast charging station to be put in. So that definitely helps. I would resist on the paper that WBC presented and you all just discussed about not being able to make that loan directly to the business. I don't know how many of my marketers are going to be willing to want to have to get in bed with a loan with the bank to take advantage of the tax credits and also the stipends that we're starting to see now come in from the manufacturers. So it's just going to be an extra hurdle if we're really going to buy into this infrastructure build out for the traveling public. We need to make sure that we don't put a barrier in place when it's really not necessary for the surety that the loan will be replaced. And that's the one thing that we're seeing too, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, is that a lot of these manufacturers who are trying to get their names in the game are coming in with turnkey projects. So all the marketers have to do is provide the space and the electrical hookup, and then they get a commission for the amount of sales that are coming in. So there's a lot of things that are changing. We still have to address the utility build out, the behind the meter issues that we're seeing, some of the communications issues. But in the long run, we support this bill. We would hope that you don't put that loan requirement, allow the loan to go directly to the business, and then they'll work in partnership with the manufacturers, get the federal tax credits. And I don't think you're going to be exposing the WBC to much risk at the tail end of that loan. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand any questions.
Mr. Larson, I have a question. I had an electrician working on my property recently, and I thought I'd just put in a charging station for, I don't have an electric vehicle, but maybe somebody in future would. He allowed is how there's 4 different charging stations, and depending on what vehicle you buy, they wouldn't interchange. Is that a problem for the marketers? That I know the first guys in have their own, but now apparently the other manufacturers are making it exclusive for them too.
Mr. Chairman, that's an astute question, because Tesla came out and they were very proprietary when they initially came in and did not allow any of the universal, and I fixed the nomenclature names to allow it to be hooked up. But now all of your auto manufacturers, your major manufacturers, have a universal plug capability. So that's really not going to be an issue in the future as you see this built out. I failed to point out too, Mr. Chairman, that there is a loan or a tax credit at the federal level for what they call juicing boxes for a resident to be able to put in a fast charger, an enhanced capability charger in their home for $1,000 credit. So and I have no idea what I've looked at the bill. There's still too much room in that 7.5 billion that will change this whole scenario as we start to play out. But yes, sir, those plugs are now going to be universal, and I believe that Tesla even has a retrofit.
Other questions for Mr. Larson? Other questions for Mr. Larson? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today, we have talked quite a bit about the role of partnering with our local financial institutions, and I love the idea of building those relationships and capacity on the ground, but I wonder if in using the terminology preference given, which I think Chairman Greer brought up earlier, on some of these tools to say when the business council is evaluating whether or not they're going to move forward with a loan, if it could be preference given to those who are working with a local bank, but not a requirement.
Okay, that's a good approach. Yes. Anything else for Mr. Larson? Anything else? Thank you, Mr. Larson, for being with us today.
Thank you, committee, very much
for being here. We have one more bill to go look at. Number 83. You want to go over that real quickly?
Sure thing, Mr. Chairman.
We're almost on time.
Yep. So this bill draft, draft 0.5. This is based on a bill. This was based on a 2020 Senate File 100. It was a bill that came out of the Management Audit Committee originally that was drafted in response to recommendations that were in a 2016 program evaluation of the Business Ready Community Program. So what this draft does is basically require the business council to promulgate rules to recapture funds associated with grants and to set interest rates for loans at a certain specified rate. On page 2, starting lines 9 and 10, this would strike the existing statutory language that states that loans under the BRC shall be made at no or low interest rates. The next new requirement would be setting a minimum interest rate for loans at the prevailing treasury rate for bonds of comparable maturity. And then moving on, so Romanet 3 would be requirements for grants for revenue generating projects and requiring repayment of the grant funds in accordance with the following. So the first requirement, that subparagraph A, would be the minimum revenue recapture percentage can't be less than the percentage of the project costs covered by the grant up to 50%. So the revenue recapture percentage couldn't exceed 50%. The next point on page 3, the amount of revenue recaptured may exceed the amount of the original grant, and then revenue generated by the project may be recaptured for the full expected life of the revenue generating asset. Next, if a project that is covered in whole or in part by a grant or loan that's issued under this program, or if that project's assigned or transferred or sold, all revenues that are generated would first be utilized to retire the project loan if there was a loan issued for the project costs. Then the bottom of page 3, after the loan is paid in full, or if a grant was used to cover part of all of the project costs, a percentage of revenues generated by that sale, assignment, or transfer, not less than the percentage of the project cost covered by the grant or loan, must be remitted to the business ready community account. And then the final change is a conforming amendment. And then these changes in this bill, Mr. Chairman, would apply only to grants and loans issued on or after the effective date of this act, which would be July 1st. With that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer questions. So, Mr. Chairman, that amount, I believe, and perhaps Mr. Keefe can correct me if I'm wrong, that amount, I believe, is set in the rules of the Business Council. There is currently no revenue recapture percentage that's stated in statute. This would change that. If the bill is enacted as drafted, I think they would have to change their rules to match the statute.
You want to address that, Mr. Keefe?
Chairman Anderson, that is correct. Mr. Fuller is right that 25% revenue recapture is set in rule.
Mr. Representative Greer.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Mr. Fuller, can you email us the definition of revenue generating project? I assume that's defined in rule would be my guess. What that is, I just would, you don't have to do it right now, but if I could get that.
Yes, Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can someone address for me page 2, line 12? The minimum interest rate for loans shall be set at the prevailing United States Department of Treasury rate and bonds comparable maturity. Because that actually can handcuff and inhibit businesses to participate. So is there a way that maybe, would it change it too much, or what's the thought behind maybe doing the maximum rate?
Mr. Keefe.
Chairman Anderson, Representative Duncan, I'll try my best. I'm not quite sure how these suggestions were made or who made them, but I think when it comes to Treasury rate items like that, I think it could potentially be more difficult to be as attractive because, as I touched on earlier, as we were structuring each of these loans, it is very project dependent, and there's different factors with each one, and I'd hate to hamstring a project if we were tied to a 20-year Treasury bond rate that might not work out very well for the strength of that company or the local municipality or whoever it might be.
Other questions? Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think it's just important to note that the first two pieces of legislation were based on suggestions and discussions with the business council. This one is not. This is kind of based on some discussion from that management audit consideration from a while back of trying to recoup some of the funds that were distributed through the business council and find ways to bring those back. So I guess more broadly, while we have the business council, do you see any of the provisions in here as being positive tools for economic development, negative tools, or are you going to be impartial on this?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Rothfuss, I think I don't know if we need to weigh in one way or another, but I'll explain it like this. The potential to make it already complicated, as we've all talked about today, program even more complicated is there with these changes. I think these changes at a local level, it reduces the empowerment that they have and the opportunity that those locals have. And as we've talked about today, that's our team. That's a team that we want to be able to empower and to help their local economics grow. And this does not, these are not necessarily positive for those entities as well. And so I think what we see it as is it definitely doesn't simplify things. It doesn't empower locals. It doesn't really extend. One of the things that I hear about a lot is this whole idea of money coming back to the state or making sure that we recoup our investment. The money that we invest in a local community and the money that we invest in these businesses in local communities, I'm pretty sure those local communities are in our state. So that investment is in our state. That investment, it doesn't have to come back to our coffers to say that that investment is growing in our state. And I'm not necessarily sure that these changes indicate that or would support that.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. As a practitioner, I will cut to the chase and say none of these suggested changes are beneficial to increasing this as a tool for our local economic development organizations. And I will be bold enough to say I would actually like to give more flexibility to the Business Council in rulemaking to be able to negotiate the recapture based on the size of the community, the complexity of the project, where they're at in their economic development life cycle, that instead of setting strict rules here in legislation, that we allow for flexibility and negotiation on a per project, per community basis. Thank you.
Yeah. Representative Greer.
Two comments, one on the interest rate. I like the language there. I just think we need to put a cap on it at like 4 or 5% in case for some reason bond rates went through the roof. And that'd be fine. Just bring some certainty to it. With respect to the recapture, this has been a discussion for a lot of years. And again, I've went through, I think we do the state and our economic development organizations justice by looking at this recapture. And again, you've heard my comments on, so look at the loans. Look at the loans that were given out. Look at the communities where those loans went. They're all communities that have advanced economic development and good for them. I mean, that's awesome. Okay. What I would ask from the business councils, could we get a list of the last 5 years of and this is this revenue generating projects by CDO and the amounts, because I would like a 3-tiered approach where if you're further along in the life cycle, the recapture gets negotiated between 50 and 75%. That gives the business council flexibility depending upon the type of project. If you've had X number, so the next tier down is between 25 and 50%. That's somebody that is part way up the cycle. And then if you are just really beginning your economic development and you haven't had but maybe one small project or a project, then recapture, we don't have to worry about it, or it's 25% by rule. So that's where I'm going to go. I'm going to work on something with that. You guys can agree with me or not, but I would ask that we could get those numbers, or if you could break those down with your suggestion of how that would happen, I'd like to see that.
Yes, Senator Rothus.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. One of the other complexities, I think, with the recapture concept is what the nature of the project is and whether there's a recapture available. We've had in Laramie, for example, buildings that were purchased, and I know in Laramie County, similar. And sometimes those buildings sell. Sometimes they sell effectively at a loss relative to their original cost. Sometimes they sell at a profit relative to the original. It gets complicated, but at least it's almost like there's a capital gain associated with it, where you have something that could be considered for recapture. I think the challenge we get into is when we require a recapture under all circumstances, if you don't have that capital gain moment, then you actually lead to what is effectively a constraining lien on the economic development for that community. And I don't know how to thread that needle. It does make sense that if you have a very sophisticated economic development organization, we build a $20 million building and that $20 million building is disposed of. I think the state has good reason to step back in and say, well, maybe we should be able to contemplate repurposing that $20 million for the best economic development use. But until that moment, I don't know how you say, all right, but we need you to pay us back 50% of that $20 million building. I don't know where that cash flow comes from. Does it? Right, when it sells for capital. But again, this is where it almost starts to look more like a lien on the property than, and you want to keep it now. Now I don't want to sell it because I've got this asset, which I don't like even necessarily. But if I have the moment of sale, which might be in the best economic interest of the community, I don't want to do that because I don't want to trigger that moment. Same thing for a standard. No, I mean, it just comes down to you're trying to look out for your community, and we put in place these unintended incentives. So it's more complicated than a simple rule or a simple formula. Sometimes it's a great idea. Sometimes it's not a good idea. I don't know how we capture that flavor, but I do appreciate the multi-tier concept, at least of some communities are going to be more able to do that than others. So I don't know how to get to the right spot, but I don't think this legislation's there. I don't know how easily we get there. The idea of providing flexibility and writing it into the grant might be a way to go about it, honestly.
Well, you can see we're going to have some interesting discussions in November about this. So, yes, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. But I think as from the perspective of the Business Council, they're going to be vetting for businesses that have a good, viable business plan, good market performance, all that stuff. And any company that's looking to take advantage of this, they would factor that in saying, well, if we're only going to be on the hook for 25%, if we're only doing 5 million in sales, but that goes to 50 if we go to 10 million or something like that, that escalation through those tiers, I assume that I guess the assumption is that they would understand that they're going to be on the hook to pay back more of that as they move up and continue to perform well. Or Mr. Durrell, it sounds like you want to clarify that.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Chairman and Representative Western, I think it's important to note that this is through the Economic Development Organization and not the viable business entity. We're not granting the business entity any money. We're not loaning them money. This is all around the infrastructure investments that we're making for a revenue generating project. So this would be basically a building. Imagine a building being built, and there's some portion of that that's revenue recapture. And I believe what Representative Greer was saying is that there's some sort of tiered, depending on your evolution or maturity as an economic development agency. You would say, oh, well, a viable, very an organization that's been around a long time and is successful, they would have to pay back more of that asset than a beginning or smaller community. And so it's not on the loan or about the business, it's and what their targets are or achievements. It's more on the asset that we are funding, that then they're getting lease payments and so on and so forth. And then when they sell it, we're saying certain communities may have to pay back more than others depending on where they are in their life cycle, was the gist of the representative's comment.
And Mr. Chairman, follow up.
Yes.
And most definitely appreciate that, but wouldn't that be in the business's kind of calculation saying, okay, if we continue to perform well, we're going to owe, obviously not the business council, but the CDO the amount of money for this building. Again, if we continue to perform well based off some metric of performance, sales, gross sales, total revenue, whatever, that they're going to be on the hook for more. And I guess my follow-up on that would be, especially if it's structured as a lease to buy, could that lease to buy be folded into the total amount owed? So if they're paying X amount a month, they graduate into these higher tiers. They say, well, hey, we've already paid a bunch of money over the last 5 years, 10 years in the lease component. Can that be calculated and towards fulfilling our obligations on the recapture component? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, and thanks, Representative Western. It is project dependent, but some of them are structured in that manner. And I think that's something that what your question is what the committee will want to wrestle with this whole idea of a tiered structure. Again, if we're talking about making something more complex and complicated, the tiered structure will invite that. I see where you're going, and I understand the idea behind it. But just remember that each of those tiers is, again, going to come with a bit of a consequence, right? And which tier do we all want to be in? We all want to be in the lowest tier. And so how do we determine that? That just puts the onus on us and our board and others to make that determination. And again, complicates an issue that maybe is already somewhat complicated. So, but that's something that we can help with, providing the data behind. And I think as Representative Greer asked for, the data behind that may help some of that to understand those things. And that could be the way we look at that first.
Representative Duncan has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, however, though, wouldn't this, even though it potentially complicates, however, we're doing more with less, correct? We're this way, we're going to be able to give more to those communities who aren't as sophisticated as other communities like my own, that is well established, more sophisticated. They are able to take advantage of this grant, as I say, quote unquote. Isn't that the idea of this 3-tiered, and wouldn't that be more successful of reaching more communities?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Duncan, I think that's probably a great question for those economic development entities. I don't think I should speak for them. I think that would be a great exercise for you all and for us to do, is to kind of talk about that particular structure and see what those, because how it affects them on the ground is something that we need to understand before we start to put it in. So I would invite you to talk with your own entities as well as those others that might be nearby that you can talk with.
Okay, Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say that this bill draft, the other two are more in the lines of just more money, more. This one is incredible because what it does is it gets us in line statutorily with the concept of this is a quote unquote investment, and there can't be a free lunch on this stuff. I mean, it doesn't, it's not the right incentive, and ultimately it doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And the way the current rule reads, where an entity can just sell the asset and get out a revenue recapture, is really problematic. And so, I mean, this came out of a legislative audit study. And yes, I understand the economic development practitioners are not going to like it, but it comes from a different framework, which is not just more money, more success. It comes from a little bit of a different framework. And so I look forward to the discussion. I understand some aren't going to like it, but I think this is the direction that we need to go. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Business Council? Hearing none. Any questions for Brian Fuller? Anything else on that 83 that you need from us?
Mr. Chairman, there was this, discussion over this tiered approach. I'm not sure if that's something that the committee wants included in the next version of the bill or some sort of amendment prepared.
I think an amendment prepared would be good for that one. Okay, public comment. Do we have a Noel Reed on the line that wants to speak?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Noelle Reed. I was just on to present the Avalon project, so I don't have any other further comments. Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry.
I'll bet there's somebody in the audience that wants to speak. Come forward if you're going to speak on this.
Good morning. I have a number of things I'd like to address.
Name and serial number.
To begin with, I'd like to introduce myself and give you some of the qualifications why I'm here. My name is Phil Christopherson. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Energy Capital Economic Development up in Gillette. Gillette is very concerned about coal, energy, and diversification of the state. If I could get my iPad to stop trying to connect to your internet so I could read my notes, I'd appreciate it. But I'm going to give you some of my background. I grew up in Wyoming, grew up in Casper. My family has owned a business there for many, many years, PC Transport. I grew up in that business, driving truck, working on trucks, and that's my background. I eventually went to the University of Wyoming where I got a degree in electrical engineering and a master's in business administration. When I graduated with my engineering degree, there were no jobs in Wyoming. It was the mid 80s. Those of you who are around here know how bad it was. I ended up working on a Boeing small airplane manufacturer in Seattle, Washington, where I worked on the defense side, designing avionics for AWACS. And I worked on the commercial side, designing flight data recorder systems. We had the opportunity to move home to Wyoming in 1999. While I was in Washington, I actually sat in your seat. I was a city council member where I learned what it's like to be in your seats. And so I have a broad range of experience. When I came back to Wyoming, I started a small business where I ran a network and computer business for a number of years. And then I started in economic development, where I worked for Idea Inc. as their executive director. And that was my first introduction to the Business Ready Community Grant Program. Pretty much from the inception, I've been writing and using this program to build Wyoming's economy. I had several successful projects in Riverton and in Fremont County, and I'll be glad to go into those at any time. But in my years, I've been on multiple boards. I've served as the president of Wyoming Economic Development Association twice. I've been on the Wyoming Business Alliance board. I currently serve on the board of directors for our family business. I'm currently on the board of directors for the Powering Up Wyoming. And I am once again back on the WIDA board, just a member this time, not the president. I want to go back in time. The BRC program was started by Governor Geringer. He's the one that came up with the concept along with the legislature, and they're the ones that initiated this program. There were concerns at that time about recapture. How is the state going to get their money back? The original concept was that the state would get their money back through tax revenues, through sales tax revenue, through property tax revenues, and other tax generated revenues. If you remember at the time, Tax Reform 2000 was a big issue. And I think most people thought that would be implemented and that there would be far more revenue generated through taxes because of Tax Reform 2000. That was shelved, that never happened. But perhaps it's time to do something like that again. The original concept and the original grants that I wrote did not have a recapture provision other than the tax revenue. The businesses that benefited, now understand, these grants do not go to a business. They go to a community, a city, a county, a joint powers board, or a tribe. The business gets the benefit of the grant, but they do not own the building. And as originally conceived, the businesses could not own the business. there was not allowed in rules for the business to have a lease to buy or a buyout provision. That only came on later. Originally, the first grants I wrote, the business could not buy the building. It could not be written into the grant agreement. If at some future point, the business wanted to buy the building or the property, there would have to be an appraisal done. And then that is what they could offer. But in most cases, that building would have to be put out to public bid. It couldn't go just to that business. But over the years, through rule changes, through legislative direction, the rules have changed to what we have today. And so as a result, I would really like to see us go back to the original intent. Go back to the time when the business couldn't write into the grant agreement, I'm going to buy this building for X amount at some point in time. I'd like to go back to the original intent that the recapture was through tax revenues, through job creation. I look at the first BRC project that I did. It was for the benefit of a company called Brunton. I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're a manufacturer in Riverton. They were being heavily recruited by communities throughout the nation. This company in Riverton had outgrown their facility, and they had designed a building. They had found a place for it. The building was going to cost $5 million to build. Upon completion, the building was expected to appraise for about $2.5 million. They could not get bank financing because what bank in their right mind would put $5 million into a building that as soon as it was done was worth $2.5 million? Does not make any business sense whatsoever. So Idea Inc. applied for a business ready community grant for $1.5 million. They got an EDA grant to put in some infrastructure, and they got a CDBG grant to put in some infrastructure. Brunton came up with a $2.5 million by borrowing the money from a local bank, and that was the match for the $1.5 million BRC grant. Brunton stayed in Riverton, continued production, and they're still there today, still employing people. This is almost 20 years ago, which brings out a point. These BRC projects can't be evaluated on a 1 or 2 or 5 or 10-year basis. They need to be evaluated on a long term. They're still paying property tax. They're still employing people. They're still paying sales tax. The point is, these projects take a long time, and that recapture does come back to the state. Now, it comes back to the communities too. Most of that property tax goes to Fremont County. The second project I worked on was a very similar one. Now, I'm talking.
Mr. Christopherson,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, we appreciate it, but we're limited on time. We've got other things scheduled. Could we just hit the high points?
Yes.
History lessons are always great, but they're better with a beer in hand. So let's go ahead and just talk about this.
Do that too.
Okay. All right.
The point is, the recapture provisions as proposed do not work. As they currently exist, don't really work. I'd like to go back to the way it was. I've had many successful projects. I'm inviting you to come see one of them next week in Campbell County with our fuel business incubator. We used a $1.5 million BRC grant to fund that project. We have over 20 members who are new startups. All of my BRC projects have been with existing businesses already here in Wyoming. I have not been very successful at recruiting businesses to Wyoming, but I've been very successful in working with existing businesses. So I would like to help the Business Council and this committee restructure this bill to make it work for economic developers around the state. And in closing, I'd like to say I'm very impressed with this committee, especially Representative Gray's questions. They're very good questions. I think they deserve answers. I'd love to sit down and talk to you about those. This committee is obviously very interested in economic development in Wyoming and making sure we have a strong economy. And I respect and admire you for that. Help us work with you to make something that works so that we have a strong economy in 10, 20, 50 years, which is what all of our economic developers are working to do. So thank you very much. I would be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions, committee? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to ask about what you were saying about thinking of this as the recapture through tax revenues. So Project A has been able to get a grant from either a local economic development authority or the state, either through just writing a good application or political connections or being likable or whatever. And they're not going to have any recapture just through tax revenues. That's the way you're saying we should think about it. Project B is a family business that has been in Wyoming. Maybe for whatever reason, they're not as popular or whatever. They haven't been able to get this funding from the state or from a local economic development authority. They still have to pay taxes. Okay. And they haven't gotten this grant from the state that isn't subject to any recapture. They've had to go through a bank. Do you think that dichotomy is actually a disincentive for economic growth? Because I see, and it would be difficult to prove this because it requires a hypothetical that is no longer in our society anymore. If you do not include recapture in this, I think that many of these programs can actually lead to a decline in economic growth, because what it does is it basically incentivizes individuals to be able to politically achieve a grant, and rather than having the market decide who has the best product, it's suddenly an economic development authority, which, with all due respect, can, I think, be quite political. And so it changes the whole dynamic of our society. I think leads to a disincentive. So I think it is extremely important to think of revenue recapture in this way. And I'm concerned that when it's not thought about in this way, it actually leads to a decline in economic growth. Anyway, well, I guess I could just say, would you agree?
Well, thank you for that question. And Mr. Chairman, Representative Gray, I understand exactly what you're saying, because one of my grants, and I've talked to dozens of people over the years about these grants and the opportunity to use them. One of them was for a small mom and pop business. They came to us and said they wanted to expand. They couldn't get a bank loan, and they saw this as an opportunity to expand. The qualifications were they couldn't own the property. The Idea Inc. would own the property, and they couldn't buy it from Idea Inc. That Idea Inc. would own it forever. And so we worked with that business. It was a successful grant program. That business is still in operation today in Fremont County, employing people and doing very well. This opportunity exists to all of the businesses out there. Many of the businesses that I talk to just don't like the qualifications. They want to be able to own the property. They don't want to have a lease. And so they disqualified themselves by not going through the process. And so this is available to all businesses in the state and all businesses who want to move to the state. It's just, I think we need to be very strict with the rules and make sure that it does not become a political process. And this is a personal opinion, one of the reasons why I think that it has changed over the years is it has become very political. And I think we need to get the politics back out of it. Let the Business Council Board evaluate these on the strength of the business and not on the strength of the politics. So I agree with what you said. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted to hear.
All right, good. Very good. Did you have a comment also?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Greer and all the members of the committee. I'm Betsy Hale. I'm the CEO of Cheyenne Leads, the economic development private nonprofit for Cheyenne and Laramie County. I would like to give you some background related to the experiences that Cheyenne Leads have had with the Business Ready Community Program. Since 1992, the state of Wyoming, via community development block grants or Business Ready Community grants, has invested $16.7 million in the 2 business parks owned and managed by Cheyenne Leads. An additional $10.2 million has been invested by Cheyenne Leads, our members, the city of Cheyenne, and Laramie County. The total investment in the development of shovel-ready, business-ready business parks has delivered a 5.6 to 1 return on investment. In other words, for every dollar the city, the county, and the state taxpayers provided to build those two business parks, Laramie County and the state of Wyoming have received a net gain of $5.60 in annual tax revenue. 11 of the businesses in the parks generate $213 million in GDP annually. There are 1,788 direct jobs at those businesses. They have created an additional 1,828 jobs that support businesses. Annual payroll at the end of 2020 was $124 million. This impact does not include the $2 billion of capital investment made by these primary employers. This data was compiled and presented in a report by the University of Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis. I'm happy to share Dr. Christelle Coliffe's report completed by the UW-BCEA this spring at your request. So I'm happy to share that with you. The Business Ready Community Grant or Loan Program, or what I like to call the GROWN program, because it is complicated, would be further complicated by this proposal. The program is not broken. It has worked, and the data presented in the UW report demonstrates that the program does effectively prepare Wyoming communities for economic growth and employment. I would request that the committee consider postponing the vote, which you have, or take any further action on the proposed legislative change until the members of the Wyoming Economic Development Association, my colleagues, several in the room today, and the staff at the Wyoming Business Council have time before your November meeting to fine tune and refine some of the requested changes. There is no doubt that economic development at times feels like a crapshoot. I've been in this game for over 30 years, and you don't always get it right. But with proper guardrails and evaluation tools, many of which you've talked about, Representative Gray, good decisions can be made, and our very precious economic development resources, which we have, can be used to invest in success. Earlier this week, the Joint Committee members received a memo from the Wyoming Economic Development Association regarding the state of Wyoming's economic development advantage as the #1 business tax-friendly state in the United States. I hope that all of the committee members read the material, as it clearly demonstrates that based on sound research from the Tax Foundation and KPMG, Wyoming cannot hang its hat or its future on tax policy. Taxes are not an economic development strategy, and they are not a marketing plan. I really enjoyed your conversations earlier. If you do have this in your inbox or your junk box, please take a look at pages 75 and 79 of the Tax Foundation report, because it does list all the incentives available in economic development in all 50 states. Those robust incentive programs make our tax policy often irrelevant when it comes to making location decisions. Within the WEDO memo, you should have seen recommendations for more collaboration between local EDOs, the Wyoming Business Council, and the Wyoming Business Resource Network. A greater provision of expertise to local EDOs from the University of Wyoming Center for Business and Economic Analysis would greatly help some of our more rural communities. I would respectfully ask that the Joint Committee offer the time to the Business Council and WEDA to develop some shared messaging, some proposed next steps, and also assistance in crafting a comprehensive statewide economic development plan. Comprehensive economic development plans are required by the Economic Development Administration to qualify for federal funding. I think that that would be a very beneficial piece of information and a strategy and implementation plan with the budget moving forward. I'd like to wrap up by adding that the presentation from Dr. Richard Boardman, the director of the Idaho National Labs, was one of the most dynamic and profound endorsements of Wyoming as a place to do business. As an economic development professional, I am ready to go and assist the Wyoming Business Council with our effort to become the hub of the modular reactor manufacturing. Some time ago, I had a good fortune of meeting Muhtar Kent, the president of Coca-Cola from 2008 until 2017. His message to me was, without investments, there will not be growth, and without growth, there will not be employment. I hope this committee will continue to make wise investments in growth and lead to employment for all Wyomingites. Thank you. I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Betsy. Is there any questions for Betsy? Oh, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to ask you a question, Betsy, about some of the tax. You know, I just want to say I get along with all the practitioners in this room, all the practitioners in our state. We just have a political disagreement on this. And I do think I think that while Mr. Christopherson says maybe we aren't agree, I think there is somewhat of a disagreement, and that's fine. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about the tax, some of your tax statements. I've heard a little bit the frustration in the committee this morning about frustration about the direction this is taken in the interim. And I want to say, I did say this at the last meeting. I do think that one of the things that the committee could do in the future, and I still think we have time to do it, is to look at the originating statute, because especially on the Wyoming Business Council, because I think that could have framed the discussion, and it can still, and provide us a little more of a framework. And we talked about that in the last. I think that's one way to approach this, maybe even in the next interim, in addition to talking about the vision and things like that. But I think we should go through the entire originating statute. And when I did that, one of the things I didn't see there is promotion of our low tax rates. And to me, I understand that some practitioners don't think that is a strategy that is going to work. But it's weird to me when I brought the bill in the session, why would anybody be against that? Just having that as a possible thing to sell us on. I think some people might like it, some might not. I brought a motion in the last meeting and then it fails. And, the bill fails. They said, well, let's work it in the interim. Then I bring a motion in the last meeting, then it fails. It fails again. It's just odd to me. Why is there such a fight on just asking us to think about it? This is one of the things that is going to be thought about as our low tax rate structure, because I understand it doesn't work in all circumstances, but I think it will work in many. And I don't think having like this defeatist attitude and when I first started thinking about this was in 2017 when the previous director came in, and one of the things that he said was tax rates never work.
Representative Gray, so is that your question? Why don't we
is there such a
promote
pushback, and just asking as
asking for
one of
that?
the framework items is for low tax rates?
Okay, all right.
Mr. Anderson.
Both of you want to answer
Well,
that?
yeah, I was going to say Chairman Anderson and Representative Gray. One of the things I want to clarify is that, I'm often famous for saying that we take people's money by force, meaning our taxpayers. So I'm probably one of the most conservative people here. But what I want to say to you is, whenever we market Wyoming as Cheyenne leads, we always start with we're the number one business-friendly state in the country. So we always start with that. But what we're finding is that companies aren't asking for that first. What they're asking for is a skilled, talented, and available workforce. So again, it's where we need to invest dollars in workforce development and training and those kinds of things. So then we talk about infrastructure, shovel-ready sites, utility costs. There are so many other things that these companies are looking for. And right around 6th or 7th in that wish list or that checklist suddenly becomes, what are your tax policies? Operating costs. We have some tremendous challenges just being competitive in sewer, water, and power rates and things. So I think there's a bigger conversation to be held. I really celebrate your idea of looking at the enabling legislation on why the Business Council was formed. Oftentimes in economic development, we have mission creep. And I guess that's why WIDA is offering to spend time with the Business Council between now and your November meeting and really dig in deeper to what we can do to have a more robust, strategic, and outcomes-based economic development strategy. So I hope that answers your question. It might not be fully to where you were going, but.
Okay, any other questions for Betsy? No other questions? No other questions? Thank you. One more question.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to start by saying thanks for the information that was passed along, and I hope everybody on the committee had an opportunity to read through these 3 relatively long, well, 2 of them were long, and detail the nuance, but it does get into some of the challenges we have and the fact that of the 30-ish indicators that were presented by this business facilities report, for example, that is looking at why you would look to a state to relocate a facility or build your business. We only showed up in one of those, which was in fact the tax structure. And ironically, I did a word search for the word Wyoming to figure out where in this report we were being lauded. And there were 3 hits on the word Wyoming. And I thought, all right, well, where else are we? The other two hits were for a city in Michigan, which is named Wyoming, Michigan. So Wyoming, Michigan outperformed us 2-1 in this report in terms of assets that you can point to for the state, where only our tax structure came up well. So we certainly do have a lot of work to do. And this is exactly what we need, which is the state of what the rest of the country thinks when they look to Wyoming, and an understanding of the effect that location has. That Location Matters report from the Tax Foundation also, I think, is useful, because it's the Tax Foundation that provides us with that #1 ranking over and over again. And then they hired out with some consultants that are really very good at what they do. I think the consulting company they employed to look at, what beyond tax burden goes into making decisions for relocating your corporate headquarters, for research facilities, for all sorts of other programs, and then looks to states that do well and why other states don't. So we can glean a lot from this. And what I hope the takeaway message is, and getting at Representative Gray's point, is that taxes alone are woefully insufficient in recruiting. And even if we lead with that, it's not going to get us very far. To address Representative Gray's specific question, though, why don't we just focus on this, since it's what we do well? And this may be more candid, I think, of a view than what anybody wants to present, is you have to be careful what you ask for. If the companies we recruit only care about low tax burdens, then we get companies that don't want to pay taxes as their central motivating factor. Those are not typically the kinds of businesses that invest in their community and give back. And getting back to the idea of why we don't want to lead with that, to me, those aren't the companies I want to recruit. I don't want folks that are freeloaders and want to benefit from coal, oil, and gas paying the bills. We've got plenty of folks that just want coal, oil, and gas to pay the bills. We've appreciated it for a long time. Thank you, coal, oil, and gas, for paying the bills year in, year out. So what I would ask, based on the reports that you've given us, how can we get ourselves to a point where we're more attractive? What changes in policy, and this is probably broader than just Wyoming Business Council, what should we be looking at that allows us to show up in, maybe a few more of those rankings and at least get ahead of Wyoming, Michigan for once?
Maybe you could get back to him offline, and with that information, we're drastically bad.
We'll be
on
here
time.
5 hours.
Mr. Chairman, though, maybe a quick answer. I realize
Quick
it
answer?
doesn't have to be as long as my question.
Okay.
There might be a few things beyond that where, from a policy standpoint, we can do a good job. And I do appreciate the fact that we're trying to get back on schedule, but this is an important discussion.
It's out of the
and
question.
I'd like to hear that.
Back on question. So a quick answer from both of you. Very quick answer. What can we do to make us more sellable?
We'd be happy to work with this offline, but number one is tax policy, an important thing. Businesses don't want to be the next minerals industry. So they're literally coming to Wyoming because they figure, if I come, I'm going to be the next tax basis for the state of Wyoming. Economic development policy. What kind of incentives can we actually offer to businesses instead of just to communities? And a whole host of other things.
And Betsy, do you have a short answer?
I do. I would just like to see a more coordinated effort with the Wyoming Business Council. WIDA is committed to that. We understand, and we listened and heard all of you today, that we've only got a window of time before February. So we're committed to working with Josh and his team in getting what I would call Representative Duncan's favorite thing, the brand for Wyoming and our messaging put together.
And I have another short question, Mr. Chairman. That's the last thing you want, but it actually is short, if I may.
Really?
It is.
A short question from Senator Rothfuss.
You ready?
I'm ready.
One of the points that was raised, Betsy, was the comprehensive development plan for the state and the need for that so that we can participate in some federal grant programs. Is there anything legislatively that you would need from us, or is this something that can grow from the Business Council and from WIDA organically?
This can grow from WIDA and the Business Council organically, and there's actually federal dollars available to put it together. It's very prescriptive process, but it is incredibly effective at getting your state to work together.
Okay, there being no further questions, thank you for your testimony. Thank you for coming and enlightening us. Thank you very much. Is there any other public comment? Any other public comment for this subject? Hearing none, we're going to close public comment and we're going to move right on to Dr. Peary and the UW High Bay Research Facility update. Dr. Peary, yes, yeah, right up here.
I guess still is morning, so good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for the opportunity you've given me today to talk about some of the work we do at the High Bay Research Facility. I have provided a bunch of slides. I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can so we can go to High Bay.
Get closer to the microphone and
Yes.
identify yourself for the public.
Of course. So I'll identify myself first. Mohammed Piri, I'm a professor of petroleum engineering here at the University of Wyoming. I'm also I hold Wyoming Excellence Chair in petroleum engineering. I'll try to go through these slides as quickly as I can because we will be going to tour the facility, and also I have made preparations for lunch preparations for everyone. So Center of Innovation Flow Through Porous Media is next, please. Is a center we established about 3 years ago, but is actually based on the about 15 years of effort. It is located at the University's High Bay Research Facility. Next, and this center that was inaugurated in 2017, it includes 90,000 square feet of high bay and highly customized laboratory space, and is a result of $100 million investment by the state and corporate entities. With the capabilities that I'm going to mention in a minute, is the only one of its kind in the world, both in terms of the capabilities and the capacity. So some examples I've included on this slide. It provides imaging capabilities at the atomic, nano, micro, and macro scales. We are able to image any porous materials with or without fluids in them at atomic level all the way to macro scale, to a meter scale. So there are a wide range of applications that I'll be talking about later today. But when we tour the facility, you will be able to see this, how they're integrated and how they're utilized. In addition to the capabilities, the center has unparalleled capacity, enabling numerous partnerships in parallel. And it has a distinguished track record of scholarly activity, technology development, commercialization, and fundraising. I'll talk about some of these as we go through the slides. And in addition, one of the key applications of the technologies we develop at the center is, of course, in oil and gas. But these technologies are inherently relevant to a wide range of science and engineering applications. And I've also brought some examples for you to learn about. Next, please. Okay, so this is the map that shows the first floor of High Bay Research Facility. The areas with red rectangles are those utilized by the Center of Innovation Flow Through Porous Media. Next. So these are our partners, contributors, collaborators, clients. As you can see, it includes a wide range of entities from corporate world and federal agencies. Includes oil and gas companies, includes equipment manufacturing companies, includes chemical companies that we work with, both here in the US and abroad. Next. So the center is home to 30 PhD students, is the largest research group on campus. And has 10 senior scientists and postdoctoral research associates, 5 staff members. Over the years, we have graduated 22 PhD students and 9 master students. And we constantly recruit high caliber scientists and graduate students at the center. And we have, the center also is extremely international group. It has representations from 25 plus countries. And as I said, it's the largest research group on campus. The Center of Innovation for Through Porous Media is 70%, constitutes more than 70% of the petroleum engineering department. just for you to know. There are 153 PhD students as of fall 2020 in 7 PhD programs in college of engineering applied science. 35 of those in petroleum engineering, and we have petroleum engineering. I won't go through all those details, but for you to know, petroleum engineering, which 70% of it is the high bay. It was the largest PhD program on campus, and now is the third largest on campus. Next. So these are the PhD students from 25 plus countries at high bay. They work on a wide range of flow-through post-media problems and applications of which will be highlighted later on in my presentation. And again, one thing I would like to highlight is something that I'm very proud of, is that these talented individuals, they come to the center. They contact the center after they look at the activities of the center. These are not the ones that I go out there necessarily try to recruit. They contact us. In other words, the center has become a magnet to attract high caliber talent to Wyoming. Next. These are our research scientists. As you can see, a large group of postdoctoral research associates and senior research scientists that collaborate with those students on a wide range of projects. And at the bottom, you can see our staff members that support the team. Next. So these are the countries represented at the Center of Innovation. As you can see, really international. This enriches experiences of those students and postdoctoral scientists tremendously. And of course, after they graduate, they get dispersed around the world. Many of them stay in Wyoming, many of them don't, but those that they leave create a network of collaboration for us as we move forward. Next. So the center has been extremely successful in raising external funding. Over the last 16 years, has raised more than $74 million in external funding. That is funding from federal agencies and corporate partnerships, as you can see the list on the screen. Next. So the center does have 2 divisions, experimental and computational division. I will very quickly highlight some of the capabilities there. Next. On the experimental side, we work on a wide range of problems. We are able to take any porous material that you can imagine and put them under application relevant conditions. It could be oil and gas recovery conditions, could be processing porous materials relevant to the conditions in the pharmaceutical industry, or could be a food. Any porous material can be subjected to certain conditions that would make them relevant to the applications that I highlighted. So these are some examples of it here on the screen. Next. I thought you would enjoy seeing some of the computational examples of computational work we do at the IBA. As in addition to University of Wyoming, the new direction the University of Wyoming is taking, the rest of the world also digitizing problems are very, very important. What you see on the screen is a new technology that University of Wyoming is leading its development. Here we are able to create digital replicas of porous materials and then compute properties in them. What you see on the right is the transport of contaminants in an aquifer. We are able to simulate how the given contaminant, for instance, moves through in an aquifer when the aquifer gets contaminated by a spill, for instance. But the same technology, we are using it in order to model a wide range of problems, including those in oil and gas recovery. Next. So we have a large DOE grant that we are working on this. In this grant, we will be piloting a new technology in North Dakota. This is, as you know, very large, a vast majority of the hydrocarbon non-conventional gets left behind. You recover between 5 to 10% of it due to hydraulic fracturing. That 90 to 95% that's left behind is an excellent target for enhanced oil recovery. Is here we will be deploying a new technology that the University of Wyoming is developing, in which we will be utilizing hydrocarbon gas-based foam to develop to create conformance control in heavily fractured pads in Bakken. The pilot is planned for Q3 2022, and University of Wyoming is on a schedule to verify the efficacy of the technology in the laboratory through this new laboratory that we developed during 2020 and 2021. This is, to my knowledge, is the most capable foam EOR laboratory in the world that we have been able to build with $3 million investment last year.
Dr. Perry, is there a corporate partner with this project
Yes.
as well?
Yes, we have Dow Chemical Company and Hess Corporation, both of them involved in this. But we work with Dow Chemical Company on the chemicals that would be effective in establishing a strong foam, and Hess Corporation has provided the pad in which we'll be deploying foam. Yes. And again, I emphasize foam has been used in conventional reservoirs, but deployment of hydrocarbon gas foam in unconventionals is a new technology we are working on. Next, please. I'll skip this slide. Next, please. All right. So I talked about very quickly about the research initiatives and the capabilities available at the Center of Innovation for Portsmouth. But over the last 15 years, together with my students and other members of our research team, we have been developing unique technologies that now we have an opportunity to commercialize. I've worked very closely with the University of Wyoming to build a spin-off company that university is partly owner of. And through this company, we commercialize those IPs that are organically conceived in our research group. Next. This company is called Pre Technologies. As I said, university is a part owner of the company. It since 2017 has been commercializing those IPs. It has national and international clients. It employs numerous UW graduates and already returning revenues to UW through royalties on IP that we license and distributions, as well as the renting equipment. I'll talk more about what this company does in a minute. Next, please. So Pre Technologies currently employs 7 highly talented professionals here in Laramie, Wyoming, with advanced degrees. 6 of these are UW graduates. 1 of them is a part-time employee focused on computational software development. And we also provide internship opportunities to students. Last fall, we had 3, and more of them are going to be doing internship later this fall, 2021. And we will be also recruiting more in 2022. Pre Technology is capable of significantly contributing to development of effective solutions to some of the technical challenges that the oil and gas industry in Wyoming is encountering. And we've had and continue to have discussions at the university and across the state in this regard. Next. All right, so we work, as I said, with the university to capture the IP very closely. As a faculty, I would be first to highlight that unfortunately in academia, faculty most of the time are not interested in or haven't had opportunities to develop expertise in how to capture IP and commercialize. I've gone through a steep learning curves over the last 6-7 years, but I'm very grateful that happened to me, and now I'm able to use that in order to commercialize IP that comes out of my research group. And we do this through completing invention disclosure forms at the University of Wyoming and then licensing the IP. But there's a background IP or improvement on background IP or foreground IP coming out of our research initiatives.
Dr. Perry,
yes, sir.
Do you think you've helped the University of Wyoming become better in this area overall and other professors?
If I can, in a humble way, the answer is absolutely yes. I would tell you, as a full professor of petroleum engineering here at the University of Wyoming, when I was at Princeton before coming here, and before at Princeton, I was at Imperial College London. Vast majority of professors have very little interest in getting engaged in these activities. Thanks to many friends and leaders in the oil and gas company, I was encouraged to do it. I'm grateful to them that I did. Now, through that, we have been able to develop sophisticated commercialization agreements the University of Wyoming now has access to, that we have encouraged them to make available to other professors if they wish to use them. Pre Technologies funded development of those agreements with about $300,000 cash. And then now those agreements, we encourage university to make them freely available to all faculty if they are interested to use them. Those include IP licensing agreements, operating agreements, facility use agreements, and conflict of interest agreements. And they're very sophisticated. They cover all sorts of many aspects of the commercialization, definitely. And I continue to encourage my colleagues in my college to do this. So over the last 15 years, we have developed more than 10, that's a very conservative estimate, I would say, invention disclosures and many patents that we continue to commercialize. Next. So these are our clients. As a company that's only 4 years old, with humility, I would say this is impressive. You can see companies in the North America and Middle East, service companies, federal agencies, that they work with us. This is not because they don't come to Laramie for weather. They come because the company has a niche in this area. We have some of the best technologies when it comes to testing porous materials under application relevant conditions. And for instance, I was mentioning to Marshall, he's sitting right here, yesterday at 6 o'clock in the morning, because of time difference, we had a wonderful meeting with Petrobras and Shell on some of their offshore reservoir problems. Okay, next. So these are the where our clients are located. You can see the companies, the young companies already international in this business. And we are very proud of that. And we continue to grow. And I have some growth data that I would like to share with you. This is, if I may say so, this is a wonderful success story of how IP developed organically in a research group at the university can be licensed and commercialized here in Laramie to create jobs. And those jobs high-paying jobs created here in Laramie are for UW graduates, 6 out of 7 of them already. Next, please. So here is our revenues. I apologize that I had to remove some of the numbers just to keep my board happy, but you can see the growth. We are very proud of that. By the way, the dotted lines from 2020 to 2021 should be solid line. I plotted this when I didn't have those data, but now I can say that that is true, that trend. And we are growing, and we continue to employ. Next. And these are our payroll growth. I've kept the numbers on this. Right now, we are about shy of $1 million just in payroll for our employees within the company. And I'm also very excited to create a new branch for the company on the computational side. I'm working with President Seidel directly on this, and I'm hoping to use that also as a platform to continue grow this business. Next. I would like to show an organizational chart that shows how I manage this. I wear 2 hats. I wear a professor hat, and I wear a business owner hat. So how do I manage that? Next, please. So this is I apologize for the small font it has and this busy slide, but essentially on the left, you can see our research division, very sophisticated organization developed over the last 15 years that allows to operate and collaborate with so many entities around the world. On the right, you see our business that has its own structure. And in between, you see a very solid Chinese wall. The relationship between 2 entities governed by those 4 sophisticated agreements that I mentioned, that we paid a very, very high-end law firm to develop together with university. And we have an advisory board on the top. And then on the left, my research activities are reported to Office of the President, University President. I work with Office of Research Economic Development. I work with the College of Engineering and the SVP of Finance at UW. On the right, the company has its own board and it has its own members. And one of the members, of course, is University of Wyoming. And what the beauty of this is that I'm a big believer in success being all about having talent and people, and the funding and infrastructure, everything is secondary. One beautiful thing about this is that the talent, high caliber talent that is graduated from the left side, then it can be channeled to the right side for employment here in Laramie, right? So with that, I'll stop. I'm happy to answer questions, and I can't wait to give you a tour of the facility after lunch.
I think we'll skip the questions because we're going to be with you for the next hour, and we'll have plenty of questions.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah. So thank you for your testimony. Thank you for your presentation. Is there any public comment on Dr. Perry's presentation? Hearing none, I'm going to close public comment, and we're ready to go to the tour. Mr. Fuller, do you have directions on everything the staff needs for everything we did today?
Mr. Chairman, I think so. And if I don't, I'll reach out to you.
Okay.
So,
all right.
And if I may, Mr. Chairman, another day brings another new staff member for LSO. I'd like to introduce quickly Pierre Chenet. I hope I pronounced that fairly closely. He's a new research analyst in our research division. He is a graduate of Utah Valley, his undergraduate degree, and recently graduated with his master's from Indiana University.
Oh, well, welcome aboard.
What is his master's in? In what?
Public defense.
Public affairs, Mr. Chairman.
I thought you would be an economist. Okay, we'll talk about it.
All right. There's nothing else to come before the Minerals Committee. We will adjourn to the tour. Everybody, we're going to do the tour and have lunch over there. The bus will take you over.
Are you herding the cats or is Holly? Okay.